Hello guys, welcome to Pika Fiction. So in this video, we will see, what if Ash became the champion of the Unova region and his prize was a harem of Iris and Roxie? If you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to show us some love by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world to us. Now, let's start the story. Chapter 1. The Weight of the Crown. The air in the Vertres Stadium didn't smell like victory. It smelled of ozone, scorched earth, and the copper tang of blood. Ash Ketchum stood at the edge of the precipice, his sneakers grinding into the pulverized rock of the battlefield. Across the scarred arena, the dust was still settling, a thick, choking haze that obscured the fallen titan. The roar of 80,000 people was a physical weight, a wall of sound that pressed against his eardrums, but Ash didn't hear them. His world had narrowed down to the ragged breathing of his partner and the silhouette of the man standing opposite him. Alder looked old. Not in years, but in the way a mountain looks old after a landslide. The former champion was on one knee, his flamboyant robes torn, his hair wild and matted with sweat. Beside him, Volcarona lay motionless, its fiery wings dim, the sun god finally eclipsed. Ash didn't smile. He didn't cheer. He just exhaled. A long, shuddering breath that released 10 years of traveling, of losing, of climbing back up. He looked down at Crocodile, who was trembling from exertion, leaning heavily on his tail, his dark glasses cracked down the middle. "It's over," Ash said softly. The microphone on his collar caught the whisper, amplifying it across the stadium, cutting through the noise like a blade. Alder looked up. There was no bitterness in his eyes, only a profound, exhausting relief. He recalled his Volcarona with a beam of red light that seemed too bright for the battered arena. He stood, his knees popping audibly, and walked toward the center of the field. "I told you once," Alder's voice boomed, though it lacked its usual jovial bounce. "That strength alone is not enough. That a champion must be more than a warrior." Ash met him in the middle. He didn't flinch. "And I told you," Ash replied, his voice steady, lacking the chaotic energy of his youth, replaced by a calm, dangerous assurance. "That I would find my own way to be that person." Alder extended a hand. It was calloused, rough as bark. Ash took it. The grip was iron. "Then lead them," Alder said, his voice dropping so only Ash could hear. "But be warned, boy. The view from the summit is cold, and the wind never stops blowing." The referee, stunned into silence for a solid 10 seconds, finally found his voice. "Volcarona is unable to battle. The winner, and the new champion of the Unova region, is Ash Ketchum." The stadium detonated. Confetti cannons fired, painting the sky in red, white, and blue, but the celebration felt distant. Ash waved, the motion automatic, practiced. He recalled Crocodile, whispering a promise of rest and the finest steak in the region, and turned toward the tunnel. He didn't run a victory lap. He walked into the darkness of the stadium bowels, leaving the light behind. He had achieved the dream. He was the master. So why did he feel like he had just walked into a trap? The locker room was a sterile white box, a stark contrast to the chaotic vibrancy of the arena. It smelled of antiseptic and fresh towels. Ash sat on the bench, staring at his hands. They were shaking. Not from fear, but from the adrenaline crash. The door hissed open. Ash expected Pikachu, who was currently with Nurse Joy getting a post-match checkup, or perhaps his mother, or Professor Oak. Instead, 3 men in gray suits walked in. They didn't look like fans. They moved with the fluid, synchronized silence of predators. On their lapels, they wore a silver pin, the stylized DNA strand of the Tao Trio. "The League High Council. Champion Ketchum," the lead man said. He was balding, with spectacles that caught the harsh fluorescent light, hiding his eyes. "Congratulations are in order. A tactical masterclass. Your use of Sandstorm to refract Volcarona's heat wave, inspired." "Thanks," Ash said, standing up. He didn't like being seated while others stood. It put him at a disadvantage. "Where is the trophy ceremony?" "I was told to wait here." "The ceremony is a formality for the masses," the man said, checking a slim tablet. "We have more pressing matters. The transition of power in Unova is not merely about a title belt. It is about stability." Ash narrowed his eyes. "Stability. Unova is fracturing, Ash," the man said, his tone shifting from polite to grave. "Since the fall of Team Plasma, the region has split. The rural traditionalists, led by the Dragon Village and Opelucid, believe technology and expansion brought ends madness upon us. They want to close the borders, return to the old ways. On the other side, the industrial centers, Verbank, Castelia, demand acceleration, believing that only unchecked progress can protect us from another threat. Ash crossed his arms. That sounds like a job for the mayors. I'm just a trainer. You are the champion, the man corrected sharply. You are the living symbol of strength. In Unova, the champion is not just a sports star. He is the keystone, the bridge between truth and ideals. And right now, the bridge is broken. The man stepped aside, gesturing to the door. Come. Your cabinet awaits. We have initiated the Unity Decree. The what? The law that will save this region from civil war. And the price you must pay for the crown you just won. The council chamber was located deep beneath the stadium, a circular room of polished obsidian and cold steel. It felt less like a government office and more like a tomb. When the doors opened, Ash saw he wasn't the only one who had been summoned. To the left, pacing back and forth with a ferocity that threatened to wear a groove into the floor, was Roxie. The gym leader of Verbank looked ready to kill. Her white hair was spiked aggressively, her signature bass guitar strapped to her back like a weapon. She wore her stage gear, torn fishnets and heavy boots, but her face was stripped of its usual stage arrogance. She looked cornered. To the right, standing rigid and silent near a statue of Reshiram, was Iris. She wore the ceremonial robes of the Opelucid heir, heavy fabrics of deep purple and gold that seemed to swallow her small frame. Her massive hair was tamed into intricate braids, but her eyes were wide, darting around the room like a trapped axew. Ash. Iris breathed out, the relief in her voice palpable. She broke her stance, rushing toward him, but stopped short when the council members filed in behind him, sealing the door. What the hell is going on, Ketchum? Roxie barked, stomping over. She jammed a finger into Ash's chest. These suits dragged me out of a gig. Said it was champion business. Since when do I answer to the league on a Tuesday night? I don't know, Ash said, gently moving her hand away. He looked at the two of them. The representative of the old ways and the icon of the new world. The pieces clicked into place in his mind, and his stomach dropped. The lead councilman cleared his throat. Sit, please. Nobody sat. Very well, the councilman said, adjusting his glasses. As I explained to Champion Ketchum, Unova is on the brink of collapse. The dragon bloodlines threaten to secede from the League. The Industrial Union threatens to embargo the dragon lands. If this happens, the economy crashes, and people starve. War follows within 6 months. So fix it, Roxie snapped. That's what we pay taxes for. We cannot, the councilman said calmly. Politics has failed. The people need a symbol. They need to see that the two sides can coexist. They need a marriage of ideologies. The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. The Unity Decree, the councilman continued, is an ancient statute from the founding of the League. It dictates that in times of great schism, the champion must bind the factions together. Literally. He looked at Ash, then at Iris, then at Roxie. Ash Ketchum, to solidify your title and prevent the dissolution of the Unova League, you are required to enter a binding political union with the High Heiress of Opelucid and the matriarch of the Toxic Underground. Silence. Thick, heavy, and suffocating. Union. Iris whispered, her face draining of color. You mean, marriage? In the archaic sense, yes. In the modern legal sense, it is a domestic partnership that grants shared assets and political unification, the councilman droned on, as if reading a weather report. You will live together. You will govern together. You will present a united front to the press. If you refuse, the League dissolves, the borders close, and the bloodshed begins. The projections estimate 10,000 casualties in the first week. You're insane, Roxie hissed. The air around her seemed to shimmer, a faint purple aura of toxicity leaking from her emotional state. I'm not marrying some country boy just because you suits can't do your jobs. And I'm definitely not sharing him with her. She jerked a thumb at Iris. The feeling is mutual, Iris shot back, her voice trembling but sharp. The Dragon Village would never accept an outsider. And certainly not a punk who pollutes the air for a living. Enough. The councilman slammed his hand on the table. This is not a request. It is a sentence. Ash Ketchum, if you decline, you will be stripped of your title, and you will be deported. Unova will fall. Is that the legacy you want? All eyes turned to Ash. He stood in the center of the triangle, the focal point of their anger and fear. 10 years ago, he would have shouted. He would have yelled about fairness, about love, about freedom. He would have thrown a tantrum. But the Ash who had just dismantled Alder didn't throw tantrums. He calculated. He looked at Roxie. Underneath the rage, he saw terror. She was a free spirit being told to live in a cage. He looked at Iris. He saw the weight of generations pressing down on her shoulders, crushing the wild girl who used to swing from vines. They were being bullied. And if there was one thing Ash Ketchum hated more than losing, it was bullies. He stepped forward, moving with a sudden, predatory grace that made the councilman flinch. Ash placed his hands on the sleek table, leaning in until he was nose to nose with the bureaucrat. You talk about them like they're property, Ash said. His voice was low, a rumble that vibrated in the floorboards. Assets. Symbols. They are necessary. They are people. Ash cut him off. My friends. He straightened up, turning his back on the council to face the two women. The tension in the room was electric. I won't force you, Ash said to them, ignoring the councilman's spluttering. If you want to walk out that door, I'll cover you. I'll call out Charizard and we'll burn this decree to ash. I don't care about the title. Iris blinked, tears welling in the corners of her eyes. Roxie's mouth opened slightly, her aggression faltering. But, Ash continued, his gaze hardening. If what he says is true, if walking away means innocent people get hurt, then I can't do that either. He looked at the councilman. I accept the responsibility. But on my terms. Terms. The councilman scoffed. You are in no position. I am the champion, Ash said. The aura flared around him. Not visible, but felt. A pressure wave that rattled the glass water pitcher on the table. And you need me. So here is how it works. We do this. We sign your papers. We play your game. He walked over to Roxie, standing close enough that she had to look up at him. But I don't own them. And they don't belong to you. He turned to Iris. We run this region. Us. Not the council. If I find out you're manipulating us, or hiding things. He let the threat hang in the air. He held out a hand to Roxie. I won't let them control you, Roxie. I swear it. Roxie stared at his hand. She looked at his eyes, amber, fierce, and incredibly earnest. She huffed, blowing a strand of white hair out of her face. You're an idiot, Ketchum. A heroic, stubborn idiot. She slapped her hand into his. But you're better than these snakes. Ash turned to Iris. Iris. She hesitated only a moment longer. The wild girl from the village saw the dragon within the man. She stepped forward, placing her hand on top of theirs. For Unova, she whispered. And because you'd get lost without me. Ash looked back at the councilman. Draw up the papers. But get out of my office. We have work to do. The councilman gathered his files, looking pale. As the door closed, leaving the three of them alone in the silence of the tomb, the reality of what they had just done crashed down. Roxie pulled her hand away as if burned. She walked to the corner, slumped into a chair, and put her head in her hands. Oh God. My dad is going to kill me. Iris leaned against the statue, sliding down until she hit the floor. The elders, she moaned. They're going to make me wear the ceremonial headdress. The heavy one. Ash sighed, leaning back against the conference table. He felt the weight settle on his shoulders. He had saved the region, but he had just complicated his life in ways he couldn't even begin to understand. So, Ash said, trying to break the tension, though his voice sounded hollow. Who wants to order pizza? Roxie looked up, one eye visible through her fingers. If you order anything with pineapple, I'm poisoning you. Husband or not. It wasn't a happy ending. It wasn't a romance. It was a pact forged in the fires of necessity. But as Ash looked at them, two of the strongest trainers he knew, he felt a flicker of something else. A challenge. And Ash Ketchum never backed down from a challenge. Chapter 1 End. Chapter 2. Venom and Verse. The helicopter ride from the pristine peaks of the League to the smog-choked basin of Burbank City felt like a descent into a different world. Ash sat near the open bay door, the wind whipping through his hair, carrying the acrid taste of sulfur and burning rubber. Below him, the industrial heart of Unova beat with a frantic, irregular rhythm. Smokestacks belched violet plumes into a sky that had forgotten what blue looked like. Neon signs flickered through the haze, pinks and acid greens advertising underground clubs, 24-hour pawn shops, and the omnipresent face of the newly crowned champion. Ash looked at the digital billboard on the side of a skyscraper. It was a picture of him, Iris, and Roxie, photoshopped together against a generic sunrise background. The headline screamed, "Unity for a new era." "It looks like a bad movie poster," Ash muttered, the headset microphone picking up his voice over the rotor wash. "Market research says the demographic responds well to stoic resolve," Agent Miller replied from the co-pilot seat. Miller was one of the new handlers assigned to Ash, a man who treated Pokemon battles like actuarial tables. "We're approaching the drop zone. The situation is volatile. The Burbank Steelworks Union has blocked the main causeway. They're demanding the repeal of the new emission taxes. Taxes that Roxie's gym inadvertently funded," Ash noted, recalling the briefing dossier he'd forced himself to read. "She's the gym leader, but her family owns the land. The workers think she sold them out to the league." "Correct. They are armed, champion. Mostly industrial tools, heavy machinery Pokemon, Kinkeldor, Excadrill. We advise a display of overwhelming force immediately upon landing. Bring out Charizard or Crocodile. Scaring them into submission is the quickest route to de-escalation." Ash unbuckled his harness, standing up as the chopper hovered over a chaotic intersection illuminated by police floodlights. "No." Miller turned around, frowning. "Excuse me. If I drop a dragon on a bunch of scared workers who are worried about feeding their families, I'm not a champion. I'm a tyrant," Ash said, sliding the heavy door fully open. "And I'm not scaring anyone into anything. Stay in the air. I'll handle this on the ground. That is against protocol." Ash didn't wait for the rest of the sentence. He stepped out into the void. The drop was about 40 feet. Suicide for a normal human, a Tuesday for Ash Ketchum. As he fell, he didn't reach for a pokeball. He focused. The aura that lived in his gut, usually a dormant hum, flared instinctively to cushion the impact. He landed in a crouch, the pavement cracking slightly under his sneakers, dust billowing out in a perfect circle. The noise of the riot died instantly. Hundreds of workers stood on one side of the barricade, clad in grease-stained coveralls, holding wrenches and pipes. Their Pokemon, massive girder spinning steel beams, coughing floating like mines, growled, but hesitated. On the other side stood the Burbank police, riot shields raised, batons crackling with electricity. And in the middle, standing on top of an overturned squad car, was Roxie. She looked exhausted. Her usual electric energy was frayed. She was screaming into a megaphone, her voice cracking. "I told you idiots. I didn't sign off on the tax. If you burn down the refinery, nobody gets paid. Think with your heads, not your." A bottle flew from the crowd. It shattered against the car door, inches from her boot. "Traitor." A voice roared from the mob. "You go up to the ivory tower with your pretty boy husband and forget where you came from." Roxie snarled, reaching for the bass guitar strapped to her back. Her hand hovered over a pokeball on her belt. The air around her shimmered with purple toxicity. She was losing control. Ash walked forward. He didn't run. He didn't shout. He just walked through the police line, the officers parting for him like the Red Sea. He walked past the barricade, past the shattered glass, until he stood next to the overturned car. He looked up at Roxie. Rough crowd. Roxie looked down, her eyes wide. For a second, relief washed over her face, quickly replaced by a defensive scowl. "Go away, Ketchum. This is my mess. I don't need the golden boy making me look weak." "You don't look weak," Ash said, pitching his voice so the front line of the mob could hear him. "You look like you're the only one trying to stop a massacre." He turned to face the workers. A burly man in the front, flanked by a Machamp, stepped forward. "So, the league sent the big gun. You gonna hyper beam us, champion? Gonna sweep the trash away?" Ash looked the man in the eye. "I'm not here to fight you. I'm here to listen." "Bullshit," someone yelled. Ash held up a hand. Pikachu, perched on his shoulder, sparked his cheeks. Not a threat, but a warning signal that cut through the murmur. "I read the Unity Decree," Ash said, his voice carrying without a megaphone. Section 4. Paragraph 2. The champion is the direct representative of the people's grievances to the High Council. That means I work for you. Not them. He pointed a thumb at the hovering League helicopter. The crowd shifted. The aggression didn't vanish, but it paused. Confusion rippled through them. If you riot tonight, Ash continued, stepping closer to the Machamp, ignoring the Pokemon's flexing muscles, the League will send the Elite Four. You'll lose. You'll go to jail. Your families get nothing. But if you put the weapons down, I promise you, nobody leaves this street in handcuffs. And I take your demands to the council myself. Tomorrow morning. Why should we trust you? The burly man spat. You're just a kid. I'm the kid who just beat Alder, Ash said, his gaze hard as flint. And I don't break promises. The silence stretched, tight as a bowstring. The burly man looked at Ash, then at the nervous police, then at Roxie, who was watching Ash with a look of utter bafflement. Then, the ground shook. It wasn't an earthquake. It was a wet, churning vibration, like the Earth's stomach was growling. A manhole cover 20 feet away blasted into the air, spinning like a coin before embedding itself in a brick wall. A geyser of sludge erupted from the sewer, thick, black, and smelling of something far worse than sewage. It smelled like decay, like old death. What the hell? Roxie jumped down from the car, her bass guitar swinging into her hands. That's not a normal backup. From the sludge, shapes began to form. Grimer and muck, but they were wrong. Their usual purple sludge was veined with glowing, sickly yellow cracks. Their eyes weren't the goofy, vacant stares of normal poison types. They were red, sharp, and filled with a rabid, mindless hunger. Grimer. One of the workers shouted. Recall them. They're going for the power lines. The wild Grimer didn't listen. They didn't move like sludge, they moved like striking snakes. One lunged at a police officer, its liquid body hardening into a spike that punched through the riot shield like paper. Defensive positions. Ash barked, the transition from diplomat to general instantaneous. Police, get the civilians back. Workers, recall your Pokemon unless they have long-range attacks. Do not let that sludge touch you. Who put you in charge? Roxie snapped, though she was already plugging her bass into the portable amp on her belt. Experience, Ash said, grabbing a Pokeball. Pignite, let's go. The fire pig materialized with a snort, flames wreathing its neck. Roxie, contain the spread, Ash ordered, scanning the battlefield. There were too many of them, dozens pouring out of the sewers, swarming the street. Use your sound waves to drive them back. Pignite and I will hold the center. Don't tell me how to rock, Ketchum. Roxie yelled, but she slammed a power cord. Her Scolipede burst from its ball, screeching as the sound waves amplified by the bass hit the swarm. The music was a physical force. The bass frequencies rattled the teeth of everyone within 3 blocks, creating a sonic wall that slowed the advancing sludge monsters. But instead of retreating, the mutated muck shrieked, a sound like tearing metal, and began to merge. They're combining. Ash realized. Pignite. Flamethrower. Full power. The jet of fire struck the mass, boiling the sludge, but the yellow veins glowed brighter, absorbing the heat. The mass grew, towering over the street, a shifting abomination of toxic waste. It's eating the energy. Roxie shouted over the feedback of her amp. Fire isn't working. It's not a normal poison type, Ash analyzed rapidly. He saw the way the yellow veins pulsed in time with the neon lights above. It's feeding on the ambient energy of the city. The electricity. He tapped his earpiece. Miller. Cut the power to the grid. Sector 4. Now. Champion. I cannot authorize a blackout of the industrial district without. Do it or we lose the city. Ash roared. The streetlights died. The neon signs flickered and went black. The only light came from the headlights of the cars and the flames on Pignite's neck. Deprived of the electrical feed, the massive sludge beast faltered, its form losing cohesion. Now, Roxie. Ash signaled. Hit it with Venoshock. Overload its own toxicity. With pleasure. Roxie grinned, a feral, manic expression that transformed her face. She stomped on a distortion pedal. Scolipede. Garbodor. Toxicroak. Let's start the mosh pit. 3 of her Pokemon unleashed a barrage of venomous energy. At the same time, Ash pointed forward. Pikachu. Iron Tail. Slice it apart. Ash didn't stand back. He ran with Pikachu. He moved through the chaotic melee, dodging globs of acid that hissed as they hit the pavement inches from him. He was in the thick of it, directing Pignite to cover the workers who were too slow to run. Roxie watched him out of the corner of her eye while she shredded a solo that commanded her Pokémon. She had seen champions fight on TV. They stood back. They gave orders. They were clean. Ash Ketchum was filthy. He was covered in soot, running straight toward a creature that could dissolve flesh, dragging a stumbling riot cop out of the line of fire. He wasn't fighting for points. He was fighting like his life depended on every single person surviving. Crazy bastard, she whispered, a reluctant smirk tugging at her lips. She hit a final, deafening chord. The combined assault of venom and physical strikes shattered the destabilized monster. It exploded, raining harmless, inert black goo over the street. Silence returned to Verbank, save for the heavy breathing of men and Pokémon. Ash wiped a streak of black slime from his cheek. He walked over to where the massive sludge beast had been. In the center of the puddle, something was glowing. Not the yellow of the mutation, but a faint, rhythmic violet pulse. He reached down, ignoring Miller's voice screaming in his ear to wait for a hazmat team, and picked it up. It was a shard of something that looked like glass, but felt like ice. Etched into it was a symbol, a circle with a jagged line running through it. The symbol of a shell. What is that? Roxie asked, stepping up beside him. The adrenaline was fading, leaving her looking small and pale in the gloom. I don't know, Ash said quietly. He looked at the workers, who were staring at him with a mix of fear and awe. The hostility was gone. You don't hate the guy who just stood between you and a toxic nightmare. Ash turned to Roxie. But someone made those things. That wasn't nature. Roxie looked at the shard, then up at Ash. For the first time, she didn't see a political rival or a forced husband. She saw a partner. Okay, champion, she said, her voice raspy. You kept your promise. Nobody died. We're not done, Ash said, pocketing the shard. He looked at the destruction. We need to get these people medical attention. And then, you and I are going to have a talk about who is really running this city. Roxie bristled, her defensive walls slamming back up. Excuse me. Someone planted this right under your nose, Roxie, Ash said, his tone not accusatory, but serious. In your sewers. On your turf. You missed it. Roxie opened her mouth to argue, but closed it. He was right. And that terrified her more than the monster. Ash. Miller's voice crackled. The council is demanding a report. And, they are asking why you are holding hands with the target. Ash looked down. In the heat of the aftermath, he hadn't realized. His hand was gripping Roxie's arm, checking her for injuries, and her hand was clutching his jacket, grounding herself. They both let go simultaneously, stepping back. Just checking for corrosion, Ash lied to the air. Just making sure you didn't faint, Roxie lied back. But the electricity that passed between them hadn't come from the grid. The cleanup took hours. By the time Ash and Roxie made it back to her gym, which doubled as her living quarters, it was nearly 3 a.m. The club was empty, the stage lights dim. It smelled of stale beer and sweat, a comforting, grounded smell compared to the chemical stench outside. Roxie limped slightly. She'd taken a piece of shrapnel to the calf during the explosion, though she'd refused to let the medics look at it until the last worker was treated. Ash walked in behind her, carrying 2 bags of takeout from an all-night diner. He looked relatively unharmed, though his jacket was ruined. Sit, Ash said, pointing to a worn leather couch in the backstage area. I'm fine, Roxie grumbled, leaning her base against the wall. I just need a shower and a drink. Sit, Ash repeated. It wasn't a request. Roxie glared at him, but her leg gave a throb of protest, and she collapsed onto the couch with a groan. You're bossy. I hate bossy. I'm effective, Ash countered. He pulled a first aid kit from his belt. He carried one everywhere, a habit from years on the road. He knelt in front of her. Pant leg up. Roxie hesitated. This was intimate. Strange. I have roadies for this. Your roadies are all passed out or at the hospital, Ash said. He looked up at her. His eyes were tired, but the amber warmth was still there. Let me help, Roxie. Please. She sighed, rolling up the torn fishnet and the denim of her jeans. The cut was nasty, caked with dried blood and grime. Ash worked in silence. He cleaned the wound with antiseptic, his hands steady and surprisingly gentle. He applied a healing salve and wrapped it efficiently. "You've done this before," Roxie observed, watching the top of his head. His hair was a mess. She had an urge to smooth it down, which she immediately strangled. "My Charizard likes to play rough. And my Infernape has a temper," Ash said, taping the bandage shut. "And I've had my share of scrapes." He sat back on his heels, looking at her knee. "You were brave out there today. Standing on that car. You held them back for hours." "I was losing them," Roxie admitted, her voice quiet. She looked away, staring at a poster of her band. "They hate me, Ash. I'm supposed to be their voice, and they threw bottles at me. If you hadn't shown up." "They were scared," Ash said. "Fear makes people do stupid things." "I was scared," Roxie whispered. Ash looked at her. The tough, punk rock exterior was peeled back. She looked young, vulnerable. "That's why you're a leader," Ash said. "Only idiots aren't scared. It's what you do with the fear that counts." He stood up, dusting off his knees. "And for the record, you play a mean bass. Even when fighting a sludge monster." Roxie let out a short, surprised laugh. "Yeah, you think you can handle the poison life, champion. It's not all roses and sunshine down here." "I think," Ash said, stepping closer, intruding on her personal space just enough to make her heart rate spike, "that I'm starting to like the grit." For a moment, neither of them moved. The air in the backstage room was heavy, charged with the adrenaline of survival and something new, something fragile. Ash looked at her lips, then met her eyes. He didn't push. He let the moment exist. Then, he stepped back, breaking the tension. "Get some sleep, Roxie. We have a council meeting at 0800. We need to show them that shard." Roxie exhaled, not sure if she was relieved or disappointed. "Yeah, sure. Sleep." Ash turned to leave, but stopped at the door. "Oh, and Roxie. What? Next time, don't hesitate to call me. We're partners. Remember." He walked out, leaving Roxie alone in the dim light. She touched the bandage on her leg. It was neat, professional, caring. "Partners," she muttered, testing the word. It tasted strange, but not bad. She leaned back, closing her eyes. The image of Ash Ketchum, glowing with aura, standing between her and a riot, burned behind her eyelids. The Unity Decree was a sham. A political cage. But maybe, just maybe, the dragon inside the cage wasn't the monster she thought he was. Chapter 2 End. Chapter 3. The Dragon's Oath. The air in the village of dragons tasted of pine resin, ancient stone, and judgment. While Verbank had been an assault of noise and neon, this place was aggressively silent. The wind whistled through the massive, hollowed-out spires of rock that housed the dragon masters, carrying the occasional roar of a Haxorus or the screech of a Drudagon. It was a sanctuary, untouched by time, and utterly hostile to outsiders. Ash walked a step behind Iris, his boots crunching on the gravel path. He felt the eyes on him, dozens of them, peering from the shadows of the roosts. They weren't looking at the champion of Unova. They were looking at the outsider, who had been forced upon their frantic, prodigal daughter. Iris had changed the moment they crossed the border. In the city, she was loud, vibrant, a whirlwind of motion. Here, she was diminished. Her shoulders were hunched, her hands clasped tightly in the sleeves of her ceremonial robes. "Stop doing that," Ash said quietly. Iris flinched. "Doing what?" "Making yourself small. You're the 8th gym leader. You're the strongest dragon master of your generation. Walk like it." Iris looked back at him, her dark eyes flashing with a mix of annoyance and fear. "You don't understand, Ash. In the league, rank is about badges. Here, it's about blood. And the elders, they think I abandoned our ways to play dress up in the city." "Then let's prove them wrong," Ash said. They reached the central plaza, a vast circular amphitheater carved directly into the mountainside. At the center sat the Elder Council, 5 withered figures draped in scale mail cloaks. And standing before them, arms crossed like a barrier of muscle and granite, was Drayden. The Spartan mayor of Opelucid looked at Ash with an unreadable expression. "Champion Ketchum. You are far from the cameras." "Mayor Drayden," Ash nodded respectfully. "I'm not here for press. We know why you are here. one of the elders croaked, a woman whose face was a map of deep wrinkles. She tapped a staff made of dragonair bone against the stone. The League's decree. They seek to graft a weed onto the great tree to keep it from falling. A weed. Ash raised an eyebrow. You are not of the village, another elder spat. You do not hear the song of the stone. You are a trainer of variety, a jack of all trades. You have no loyalty to the type. To bind our heiress to you is an insult to the lineage of Haxorus. Iris stepped forward, her voice trembling slightly. Grand Elder, Ash is. Silence, child. The elder barked. You have already shamed us by failing to take the championship yourself. Now you bring this. Kanto boy. To protect you. Ash felt the anger radiant off Iris. It wasn't just embarrassment. It was the pain of a daughter trying to please impossible parents. Ash stepped past her, placing himself between Iris and the council. The movement was fluid, shielding her. I didn't come here to ask for your permission, Ash said, his voice projecting clearly to the gathered crowd of dragon tamers. The League made the law. I'm just following it. He looked the Grand Elder in the eye. But I don't want a partner who is seen as a failure. So, tell me, how does an outsider earn respect in this village? Drayden stroked his beard, a glint of interest sparking in his eyes. Respect here is not given, Ketchum. It is taken. Through the trial of the scale. I'll battle anyone you want, Ash said, reaching for a Pokeball. Charizard. Crocodile. Dragonite. No Pokemon, Drayden interrupted. Ash paused. Excuse me. The bond between dragon and human is physical, Drayden rumbled, stepping forward. He ripped off his heavy cloak, revealing arms that were corded with muscle, scarred from decades of wrestling hydreigons. A dragon master does not hide behind his beasts. He stands beside them. To lead Iris, you must prove you have the constitution of a dragon. He pointed to the spire of Zekrom, a jagged, needle-like peak that pierced the clouds above the village. It was sheer, slick with moss, and looked impossible to climb without gear. Retrieve the scale of the first from the summit, Drayden said. Before the sun touches the western ridge. If you fall, you die. If you fail, the village of dragons will reject the unity decree, and the civil war begins. Iris gasped. That's suicide. Only those with draconic ancestry can survive the altitude and the currents. Ash is human. Ash looked at the peak. It was high. Dangerously high. He unzipped his jacket, tossing it to a stunned Iris. He cracked his neck. Just get the scale. Drayden narrowed his eyes. Yes. Hold my Pikachu, Ash said. The climb was agony. The wind at 2,000 feet didn't just blow, it bit. It tore at Ash's fingers, trying to pry him off the sheer rock face. His muscles burned with lactic acid, screaming for relief. Ash gritted his teeth, finding a finger hold in a crack barely an inch wide. He hauled himself up, his sneakers scrabbling for purchase on the slick basalt. Below him, the village was a collection of specks. Above him, the clouds swirled, thick and gray. Why am I doing this? The thought intruded as his grip slipped, sending a shower of pebbles into the abyss. He caught himself with one hand, his shoulder wrenching painfully. He wasn't doing it for the League. He wasn't doing it for the title. He looked down. Through the haze, he could see a speck of purple. Iris. She was watching him. He was doing it because she needed to see that she wasn't alone. That someone was willing to bleed for her. Ash closed his eyes and breathed. He didn't have claws. He didn't have scales. But he had aura. He focused on the energy in his core. The same energy he had used to rush the Tree of Beginning. The same energy that let him bond with Greninja. He pushed it outward, not as a blast, but as a reinforcement. His grip tightened. His senses sharpened. The wind felt less like an enemy and more like a current he could read. Be like the dragon, he thought. Don't fight the storm. Ride it. He moved. Faster now. He leapt across a 3-foot gap, catching a ledge with precision. He scrambled up the final chimney, his breath coming in ragged gasps, until his hand slapped onto the flat stone of the summit. He pulled himself up, collapsing onto the small plateau. The air was thin, dizzying. In the center of the peak, resting on a pedestal of obsidian, was a single scale. It was ancient, gray, and pulsed with a faint, deep rhythm. A scale of the original dragon. Ash staggered to his feet. He grabbed the scale. It was warm. He looked out over the horizon. From here, he could see the entirety of Unova. The forests, the cities, the ocean. It was beautiful. And it was fragile. Hope you're watching. Drayden, Ash wheezed. When Ash stumbled back into the plaza, 3 hours later, silence reigned. His hands were bleeding. His shirt was torn. He was covered in moss and rock dust. But in his right hand, held high, was the scale. He didn't walk to the elders. He walked to Iris. She was staring at him, her mouth slightly open, her hands trembling. You, she whispered. You actually did it. Ash dropped the scale into her hands. For you. He turned to the elders, swaying slightly on his feet. Satisfied. The Grand Elder looked at the scale, then at Ash's bloody hands. For the first time, the contempt was gone, replaced by a grudging, stony respect. He has the spirit, Drayden announced, his voice booming. He is not of the blood, but he is of the bone. The village accepts him. The tension in the air snapped. The dragon tamers erupted into low murmurs of approval. It wasn't a cheer, but in this place, acknowledgement was the highest honor. Ash felt the adrenaline crash. The world tilted. Iris caught him. She was surprisingly strong, her arm wrapping around his waist, taking his weight. You idiot, she hissed, but her voice was thick with emotion. You absolute child. Did I win? Ash mumbled against her shoulder. Yeah, Iris said, squeezing him tight. You won. Night fell over the valley, deep and absolute. The celebration feast had been subdued but hearty, roasted meats and bitter mountain wine. Now, the village was quiet. Ash sat by the fire in the guest lodge, bandaging his hands. The aura had accelerated the healing, but the skin was still raw. The door creaked open. Iris slipped in. She had changed out of the heavy ceremonial robes into her usual attire, the cream top and leggings. She looked more like herself, but the wildness in her eyes was tempered by something softer. She didn't say anything. She walked over, sat down on the fur rug beside him, and took the roll of bandages from his hand. You're terrible at wrapping these, she muttered, unwinding his clumsy attempt. I usually have Brock or Scylla for this, Ash admitted. Iris worked in silence for a moment, her fingers deft and cool against his hot skin. Why did you really do it, Ash? You could have called Charizard. They would have been mad, but you're the champion. You could have forced them. And proved them right. Ash looked at her. They think you're weak because you left. If I used power to force them, it would just show that you need a bodyguard. By doing it the hard way, I showed them that you chose a partner who respects their ways. Iris stopped rapping. She kept her head down, her hair hiding her face. I'm scared, Ash. I know. Not of the war, she said. I'm scared of this. Being the matriarch. I'm just a girl who likes to swing from vines and eat berries. I'm not a queen. You're not a queen, Ash agreed. Iris looked up, hurt flashing in her eyes. You're a dragon master, Ash smiled. And dragons don't rule from thrones. They rule from the sky. He shifted, turning to face her fully. You think I know how to be a champion? I'm making this up as I go. But I know one thing. We're stronger when we follow our instincts. Iris stared at him. The firelight danced in his amber eyes. He wasn't the dense boy she traveled with through Unova. He was a man who had climbed a mountain for her. The shift in the air was sudden. The little kid dynamic evaporated. Instincts, Iris whispered. She moved. It wasn't a tentative lean in, it was a strike. She pushed him back onto the rug, straddling his waist, pinning his wrists to the floor. It was a play fight move they had done 100 times while training, but this time, she didn't let go. My instincts say you're still soft, she challenged, her face inches from his. Try me, Ash replied, his voice dropping an octave. Iris grinned, a sharp, feral expression. She shifted her weight, testing his hold. Ash reacted instantly, twisting his hips and rolling them over so he was on top. Iris laughed, a genuine, throaty sound, and hooked her legs around him to flip him back. They wrestled. It was rough, physical, a release of the day's tension. It was a conversation of bodies, dominance and submission trading places every second. Finally, they came to a stop, Ash hovering over her, both of them breathing hard, chests heaving. Iris's hair was fanned out like a halo on the fur rug. Her cheeks were flushed. Ash froze. He realized the position. He realized that for the first time, he didn't want to get up. Iris stopped laughing. Her eyes searched his face. She reached up, tracing the scratch on his cheek. "You're not a little kid anymore," she whispered. "Neither are you," Ash murmured. He leaned down. It wasn't a perfect, movie star kiss. It was fierce. It tasted of wine and smoke. Iris responded with the same intensity she brought to battle, her hands tangling in his hair, pulling him closer. It was the sealing of a pact. Not the one on paper, but the one in blood and breath. Boom. The explosion shattered the moment. The walls of the lodge shook, dust raining down from the rafters. A high-pitched, oscillating whine pierced the air, a sound so painful it felt like a needle in the brain. Ash and Iris broke apart instantly, rolling to their feet, the intimacy replaced by combat readiness. "What was that?" Iris yelled over the noise, clapping her hands over her ears. "Sonic cannon," Ash shouted. He grabbed his belt. "Come out." He threw a pokeball. Dragonite materialized, but immediately collapsed, clutching its head, roaring in agony. "Dragonite!" Iris screamed. She released Haxorus, but the result was the same. The mighty dragon fell to its knees, disoriented and retching. "It's an anti-dragon frequency," Ash realized, recalling his report on Varian's tech. "It targets their specific biological resonance. It paralyzes them." The door to the lodge was kicked open. Men in matte black tactical gear poured in. They weren't holding pokeballs. They were holding stun batons and capture nets. "Target secured," the lead mercenary said, his voice mechanically amplified. "Secure the heiress. Eliminate the champion." Ash didn't hesitate. "Iris, get behind me. My Pokemon. They can't fight. Recall them." Ash roared. He didn't have a weapon. He didn't have a functional Pokemon. Pikachu was in the other room, likely disoriented by the noise as well. He had his hands. The first mercenary lunged. Ash sidestepped the baton, grabbing the man's wrist and using the momentum to slam him into the doorframe. The mercenary crumpled. "Physical combat authorized," the leader stated emotionlessly. 3 of them rushed him. Ash Ketchum had traveled the world. He had fought Lucario. He had survived Mewtwo. He wasn't a martial arts master, but he was fast, and he had the aura. He ducked a swing, sweeping the legs of the second attacker. He took a baton strike to the ribs. Pain flared, white hot, but he gritted through it, driving a shoulder into the man's solar plexus. "Iris, go," Ash yelled, grappling with a man twice his size. "No." Iris grabbed a heavy iron poker from the fireplace. With a warrior's cry, she swung it like a club, cracking it against a mercenary's helmet. "This is my village." She fought with the agility of the jungle. She leapt off the table, kicking a mercenary in the face. They stood back to back in the center of the room. "They're after you," Ash panted, wiping blood from his lip. "They want the bloodline. They'll have to take my corpse," Iris snarled. From outside, the sound of battle raged. The village was in chaos. The dragons were useless, screaming in pain from the frequency. The tamers were fighting hand to hand, but they were losing. "We need to kill that sound," Ash said. "Where is it coming from?" "The hovership. Above the plaza." Iris pointed out the shattered window. A dark, angular craft was hovering silently, the source of the sonic waves. "Pikachu," Ash yelled. "Buddy, I know it hurts. I need you." From the bedroom, a small yellow form crawled out. Pikachu was dragging his back legs, his ears flattened, whimpering. The frequency affected him too, though less than the dragon's. Ash's heart broke, but he needed his partner. "Iris, cover me," Ash ordered. Iris swung the poker, holding off 2 attackers. "Do it." Ash scooped up Pikachu. "I'm gonna throw you. You need to hit that ship with everything you have. Can you do it?" Pikachu looked at Ash. The little rodent's eyes were hazy, but he saw Ash's determination. He nodded weakly. "Pika." Ash ran. He vaulted over the unconscious mercenary, burst out the door, and sprinted toward the cliff edge. "Hey!" he screamed at the ship. The spotlight swung to him. "Chew on this." Ash used his aura to enhance his strength. He spun and threw Pikachu like a fastball, launching the electric mouse high into the air, straight at the hovering craft. Pikachu. Volt tackle. Midair. Fighting through the pain, Pikachu ignited. The yellow blur turned into a golden comet. The adrenaline overpowered the sonic pain for one split second. Pikachu. Pikachu slammed into the ship's exposed underbelly generator. The explosion was blinding. The sonic whine died instantly. All across the village, dragons shook their heads, the fog clearing. A roar shook the mountain. Not a scream of pain, but a scream of rage. Drayden's Haxorus rose. The elders' Drudagons rose. Iris's Dragonite stood up in the lodge, eyes glowing red. The mercenaries froze. Ash caught the falling Pikachu, cradling him to his chest. He looked at the lead mercenary, who was backing away. You made a mistake, Ash said cold. You woke the dragons. The cleanup was brutal. The mercenaries were routed within minutes once the dragons were active. Most were captured. A few escaped into the night. Ash stood on the edge of the plaza, watching the tamers secure the prisoners. Drayden was interrogating the leader, his face a mask of fury. Iris walked up to Ash. She was bruised, her clothes torn, soot on her face. She looked magnificent. Pikachu, she asked softly. Sleeping. He's exhausted. Ash stroked the mouse's ears. Iris looked at the burning wreckage of the hovership. They had tech that could neutralize an entire type. If they use that on a city, they won't get the chance, Ash said. Iris reached out, taking Ash's hand. Her grip was iron tight. The playfulness of the bedroom was gone, replaced by the grim reality of war. You fought for us, Iris said. Without Pokemon. You bled for this village. I told you, Ash said, looking at her. I'm not going anywhere. Iris stepped in, resting her forehead against his chest. It was a gesture of submission and possession all at once. The triad, she whispered. Roxie handles the poison. I handle the power. And you. I handle the impossible, Ash finished. Iris looked up, a small, tired smile gracing her lips. I was going to say, you handle the headaches, but that works too. Ash laughed, but his eyes were scanning the horizon. He had found the shard in Verbank. Now, a sonic weapon in the village. Varian was testing them, probing for weaknesses. And he had found one. The champion can be killed if you strip him of his monsters. Ash tightened his fist. He needed to get stronger. Not just his team. Him. We leave for Castelia tomorrow, Ash said. We need to find Roxie. And we need to hunt this Varian down. Together, Iris agreed. As the sun began to rise over the battered peaks, the bond between them wasn't just a legal decree. It was a knot tied in adrenaline and survival. The dragon and the traveler. And somewhere in the shadows, Varian watched the feed from a drone, and smiled. Good, the antagonist whispered. Let them feel like heroes. The fall is always sweeter from the summit. Chapter 3 End. Chapter 4. Politics of the Blade. Castelia City did not sleep, it merely changed its lighting. From the panoramic windows of the Royal Unova Hotel's penthouse suite, the metropolis looked like a circuit board of gold and obsidian. The massive skyscrapers pierced the night, connected by the weaving bioluminescence of traffic and the distant, rhythmic flash of the lighthouse. Ash Ketchum stood in front of a floor-to-length mirror, tugging at the collar of a tuxedo that cost more than his mother's house in Pallet Town. If I choke to death, Ash muttered, tell the press it was an assassination, not fashion. Stop fidgeting, Iris commanded. She was sitting on a velvet ottoman, surrounded by a team of stylists who were currently battling her hair into submission. The collar is fine. You just have a thick neck. It's a strangulation device, Ash countered, finally abandoning the tie and leaving the top button undone. It was a small rebellion, but it was necessary. At least you get pants, a voice grumbled from the changing screen. Roxie stepped out. The room seemed to pause. The gym leader of Verbank had been stripped of her torn fishnets and heavy boots. In their place, she wore a gown of shimmering, iridescent fabric that shifted from deep violet to toxic green depending on the light. It was strapless, exposing the pale skin of her shoulders and the faint scars of a life lived in mosh pits. She wore heels that looked like stilettos made of obsidian shards. She looked stunning. And she looked like she wanted to murder everyone in the room. I feel like a metapod, Roxie spat, kicking the heavy hem of the dress. I can't run in this. I can't kick in this. If a fight breaks out, I'm going to have to beat people to death with my shoes. Ash turned. His breath hitched, just for a second. He was used to Roxie covered in grease and sweat, shouting into a microphone. Seeing her like this was like seeing a wheezing evolve into something mythical. You look. Ash started. Don't say. Pretty, or I'll punch you, Roxie warned, though her cheeks flushed. Dangerous, Ash finished with a grin. Like a viper in silk. Roxie blinked, then smirked. Okay. That I can work with. Iris stood up, waving the stylists away. She wore the traditional gala dress of Opelucid, a regal, high-necked gown of white and gold, resembling the plumage of Reshiram. She looked every inch the dragon heiress, regal and untouchable, but Ash saw the way her hands clenched into fists at her sides. We are late, Iris said, her voice tight. The gala started 20 minutes ago. The council says this is the most critical night of the transition. The donors, the press, the regional ambassadors, they are all waiting to see if the unity decree is a joke. Ash walked over to them. He stood between the two women, the punk rocker and the princess. The contrast was jarring, yet somehow, visually perfect. The chaos and the order, anchored by the man in black. Let them look, Ash said, offering an arm to each of them. We aren't going down there to impress them. We aren't, Iris asked, taking his left arm. No, Ash said, the amber in his eyes darkening. We're going down there to inspect them. This isn't a party. It's a battlefield. And we need to see who's holding a knife. Roxie hooked her arm through his right, her nails digging slightly into his sleeve. Battlefield. Right. I can do battlefields. Just don't ask me to eat escargot. Deal, Ash said. Let's go crash this party. The grand ballroom of Castelia was a cavern of crystal and light. A live orchestra played a soft, innocuous waltz that floated over the murmur of 1,000 wealthy conversations. When the heavy oak doors swung open and the announcer boomed, Champion Ash Ketchum and his consorts. The room went silent. Ash stepped onto the balcony overlooking the dance floor, Iris and Roxie flanking him. He felt the weight of 1,000 eyes. He didn't wave. He didn't smile the goofy Ash Ketchum smile. He scanned the room with the predatory focus of a trainer looking for a weakness. He saw the council members in the corner, watching like vultures. He saw the socialites hiding behind fans, whispering. He saw the cameras flashing like strobe lights. Walk, Ash murmured. They descended the grand staircase. The crowd parted. Mr. Ketchum. A reporter from the Castelia Times thrust a microphone in his face. Is it true that the unity is purely symbolic? Sources say Miss Roxie has threatened to secede Verbank despite the marriage. Sources say a lot of things, Ash said smoothly, not breaking stride. Roxie. Roxie glared at the reporter. Verbank is part of Unova. But if the League tries to tax my people into poverty again, the only thing seceding will be your teeth. The reporter paled. What my partner means, Iris interjected, her voice cool and melodic, masking the threat with diplomatic grace, is that this administration is focused on equity. The Dragon Village stands with the industrial sector. We are one. She squeezed Roxie's arm. A warning, but also a show of solidarity. They reached the center of the room. A waiter approached with champagne. Ash took 3 glasses, handing them to the girls. Don't drink it, he whispered. Just hold it. Paranoid? Roxie asked. Prepared, Ash corrected. I smell something. Not literal poison. Something wrong. His aura was buzzing. It wasn't a distinct threat, like a red dot on a radar. It was a fog. A sense of malice that permeated the room, hidden behind the perfume and the money. Champion Ketchum. The voice was smooth, like velvet over gravel. Ash turned. The crowd had cleared a circle around a man standing near the ice sculpture. He was tall, wearing a suit of midnight blue. His hair was silver, slicked back, and his eyes were a pale, unnerving gray. He held a cane topped with a sphere of cut diamond. Ash recognized him from the files. Varian. The philanthropist. The tech mogul. The man who had been erased from history. Mr. Varian, Ash said, his muscles tightening. I didn't know you were on the guest list. I helped pay for the venue. Varian smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. I wanted to see the savior of Unova in the flesh. And his lovely prizes. Roxie bristled. Watch it, Grandpa. Varian chuckled softly. My apologies. Partners. It is a fascinating experiment, isn't it? Trying to weld the past and the future together with nothing but a boy's charisma. He stepped closer, invading Ash's personal space. The scent of ozone and cold air clung to him. You fought well in the village, Varian whispered, low enough that only the three of them could hear. My mercenaries were unrefined. A blunt instrument. Ash didn't flinch. So you admit it. I admit nothing, Varian said, leaning back and raising his voice for the onlookers. I was merely complimenting your bravery. It must be exhausting, carrying the weight of the region. Tell me, champion, do you ever wonder if the region wants to be saved? People want to live, Ash said. People want peace, Varian corrected. They want the noise to stop. The constant struggle. The battles. The pain. Imagine a world where ambition doesn't lead to suffering, Ash. A silent world. A perfect world. A dead world, Iris said, her voice sharp. Varian looked at her, his eyes lingering on the scale of the first hidden beneath her dress. He knew it was there. The dragon speaks of life, yet her ancestors burned this region to the ground 3 times in the name of truth. Is that not irony? He turned back to Ash. Enjoy the party, champion. Eat, drink. For tomorrow. Well, the weather is turning. Varian bowed mockingly and dissolved into the crowd. I really want to punch him, Roxie growled. Can I punch him? Just a little. Not here, Ash said, watching Varian's back. He wants us to cause a scene. He wants us to look like savages in front of the cameras. Champion Ketchum, the master of ceremonies announced. The first dance is reserved for the Unity Triad. The spotlight hit them. Ash sighed. I hate dancing. Just follow my lead, Iris said, setting her glass down. And try not to step on my toes. They are expensive toes. Ash took Iris's hand. The orchestra swelled. They moved into the center of the floor. It was awkward at first. Ash was stiff, his movements jerky. But Iris was a master of flow. She guided him, her hand firm on his shoulder, whispering counts. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Relax, Iris murmured, leaning close. You fought a legendary dragon. You can waltz. The dragon didn't have photographers, Ash grumbled. But he found the rhythm. He stopped thinking and started feeling. The movement of the music, the sway of Iris's dress. He spun her. She laughed. A genuine sound that broke the tension. Then, the music shifted to something faster, more rhythmic. Switch. Roxie called out. She cut in, grabbing Ash's hand. Unlike Iris's fluid grace, Roxie was energy. She didn't glide. She bounced. She turned the waltz into something almost tango-like, sharp and aggressive. Keep up, slowpoke. Roxie grinned, dipping him instead of the other way around. Ash laughed, catching her waist. For a moment, the room disappeared. It was just the 3 of them, passing the energy between them. Truth and ideals, tradition and modernity, held together by the pivot point. They were a unit. They fit. And then the lights went out. Total darkness. The music stopped with a screech of discordant strings. A collective gasp rose from the crowd, followed by the first screams. Stay close. Ash's voice cut through the dark. He didn't need eyes. His aura expanded instantly, mapping the room in blue pulses of energy. Heat signatures. 300 civilians. Panic. Movement near the ceiling. Above us. Ash shouted. Glass shattered. From the high domed ceiling, figures dropped on repelling lines. They were clad in stealth suits that shimmered, blending into the darkness, Zoroark-tech camouflage. Assassins. A guard screamed before being silenced by a tranquilizer dart. Roxie. Iris. Back to back. Ash commanded. He felt them press against him. Iris's silk dress rustled. Roxie's breathing was sharp and angry. I can't see a thing. Roxie hissed. I can, Ash said. 3 at 12 o'clock. 2 at 6 o'clock. They have blades. No guns. Blades. Iris scoffed. How archaic. We don't have our belts. Roxie realized. The League had required them to check their Pokémon at the door for security. We are the weapons, Ash said. The first assassin lunged from the darkness, a monofilament knife aiming for Ash's throat. Ash didn't dodge. He caught the wrist. He twisted. The assassin grunted, the bone snapping audibly. Ash used the momentum to throw the man into a table of hors d'oeuvres. Iris. High kick. 2 o'clock. Ash barked, acting as their radar. Iris didn't hesitate. She trusted him blindly. She lashed out with a high sweeping kick, her heavy dress acting as a counterweight. Her heel connected with a helmeted head. Crack. Roxie. Sound check. Floor level. Roxie ripped the decorative metal piping off a passing dessert cart. She slammed it against the marble floor. Clang. The sound was deafening in the enclosed space. It wasn't just noise, it was echolocation. Roxie, used to playing in pitch-black clubs, heard the subtle shifts in the air. Got him, she snarled. She swung the pipe like a baseball bat, connecting with the midsection of an invisible attacker who had been sneaking up on Ash's left. The room was chaos. The rich were stampeding. The assassins were professional, silent, and lethal. They weren't trying to capture, they were trying to kill. They're targeting the exits, Ash realized, sensing the squad moving to seal the doors. They want to massacre the council. We have to get to the dais. Iris yelled. Too far. Roxie shouted, parrying a knife strike with her pipe. There's too many of them. Ash closed his eyes. He needed a equalizer. He reached into his pocket. He didn't have Pokeballs, but he had the shard from Verbank. The one pulsing with void energy. He didn't know how to use it. But he knew energy. Girls, get down. Ash gripped the shard. He funneled his aura into it, trying to overload it. The shard shrieked. A pulse of violet light exploded from Ash's hand. It wasn't an attack, it was a negation. The wave washed over the room. The assassins' stealth suits short-circuited, sparking and failing, revealing 12 men in black armor. Lights are back on. Roxie yelled. Let's rock. Now that they could see, it was a slaughter. Iris tore the long skirt of her dress off, revealing combat-ready leggings underneath. For the village. She moved like water, using the flowing fabric of her torn dress to entangle an assassin's arms before delivering a palm strike to the chest that sent him flying across the room. Roxie was a brawler. She fought dirty. She stomped on insteps, elbowed throats, and used her metal pipe with brutal efficiency. This dress cost $5,000. You're paying for it. Ash moved through the center, a blur of motion. He didn't strike to kill, he struck to incapacitate. Pressure points, joint locks, throws. He was the eye of the storm. An assassin, realizing they were losing, pulled a grenade from his belt. Bomb. A councilman screamed. Ash saw it. He didn't have time to reach it. Pikachu isn't here, Ash thought. I have to do it. He extended his hand. He focused every ounce of his will, every memory of every blast he'd ever taken. He created a sphere of aura. Visible, blue, swirling. He didn't throw it. He caught the explosion. The grenade detonated. Ash's aura shield flared, containing the fire and shrapnel in a bubble of energy. The strain was immense. Veins popped on Ash's forehead. The floor beneath him cracked. Ash, Iris and Roxie screamed in unison. With a roar, Ash compressed the shield, crushing the explosion into a harmless puff of smoke. He collapsed to one knee, gasping for air. The room was silent. The assassins were down. The guests were cowering. Ash looked up. Sweat dripped down his nose. His tuxedo was shredded at the shoulder. Slowly, the council members peeked out from under the tables. They looked at Ash, not as a celebrity, but with terrified awe. He had stopped a bomb with his hand. Roxie and Iris ran to him. You idiot, Roxie yelled, checking his hands for burns. You could have lost an arm. Did anyone get hurt? Ash wheezed. Just the bad guys, Iris said, her voice shaking as she helped him stand. Then it's a good party. Ash managed a weak grin. The aftermath. The balcony. The police had secured the building. Varian was nowhere to be found. His donation check, however, was still sitting on the council table, an insult. Ash, Iris, and Roxie stood on the high balcony, away from the madness. The cold night air felt good against their sweat-soaked skin. Ash held a glass of water, his hand still trembling slightly from the aura overuse. He was testing us again, Ash said quietly. First the monsters. Then the tech. Now the teamwork. We passed, Roxie said, leaning on the railing. Her dress was ruined, ripped at the thigh and stained with soot. She looked incredible. We survived, Iris corrected. She was fixing her hair, pulling out the loose pins. But he knows now. He knows we will fight for each other. Ash looked at them. I realized something down there. What? Roxie asked. When the lights went out. I wasn't worried about myself, Ash said. He looked at Roxie, then at Iris. I was terrified he would hurt you to get to me. The silence stretched. The wind blew through the concrete canyons of Castelia. Iris reached out and took Ash's hand. Roxie hesitated, then took the other. We're the Triad, Ash, Roxie said softly. You don't protect us. We protect the center. That's how the formation works. Besides, Iris smirked, regaining her composure. You owe me a new dress. And I have very expensive taste. Ash laughed, the sound echoing over the city. Put it on the League's tab, Ash said. As they stood there, hands linked, looking out over the city they were sworn to protect, the Unity Decree didn't feel like a law anymore. It felt like a promise. But deep down, Ash felt the shard in his pocket growing colder. Varian wasn't done. The game had just moved from pawns to knights. And the next move would be checkmate. Chapter 4 End. Chapter 5. The Frozen Mirror. The flight to the giant chasm was a rush of grim necessity. Ash sat in the cockpit of the League's fastest jet, not relaxing into the leather, but hunched over the main console, scrubbing through satellite imagery. Iris and Roxie were crowded behind him, the small space crackling with focus. They had linked the assassin's sonic emitter from the village to the corrupted sludge found in Verbank. The common factor was the energy signature, a void, a negative charge that seemed to consume the life force of other Pokemon. Roxie had dubbed it the hollow signature. The resonance signature is spiking, Roxie said, tapping fiercely on a tablet. Her fingers, usually quick on the bass strings, were equally precise on the screen. It's centered on the giant chasm. Deep inside the crater. The chasm is where the original dragon split, Iris murmured, her voice tight. She stood beside Ash, her hand resting on the back of his chair, steadying herself. The elders say that the void left by the split created a physical wound in Unova. Harem is the shell that remains. Varian isn't just a rich psycho, Ash said, zooming in on the deep, frozen cavern on the screen. He's trying to exploit that wound. He wants to weaponize the negative space, the hollow shell, and use it to erase the concepts of truth and ideals altogether. Nihilism in a tuxedo, Roxie scoffed. And the energy source he needs is down there. That's why he's luring us. Good, Ash said, pulling the stick back on the console. Because we're done waiting for him to make a move. We're going in for the checkmate. The jet screamed toward the colossal impact crater. The air was so cold it felt brittle, cracking in the lungs with every breath. Ash had brought his heavy hitters, Crocodile, Dragonite, and Pikachu, along with Iris's Haxorus and Roxie's Scolipede. They stood on the lip of the chasm, a hostile environment of ice, rock, and relentless wind. Stay close, Ash ordered, pulling the fur collar of his heavy coat tighter around his face. Iris, you lead the navigation. Your dragon sense will be clearer than the radar. Roxie, keep an eye on our heat signatures. If Varian hits us with ice, we need to know before we freeze. Iris nodded, her eyes narrowed against the biting wind. The energy is deep. It feels static, like the world stopped breathing down there. They descended into the vortex, the light dimming rapidly, replaced by the eerie blue glow of ancient, crystalline ice formations. The floor of the chasm was covered in razor-sharp shards that whispered under their boots. Ash's aura was muffled. It was like standing in a soundproof room. He could feel less, and that unnerved him more than any direct attack. They navigated the ice labyrinth for an hour, the tension ratcheting up with every echoing footstep. Ash, Iris whispered, stopping abruptly. She pointed to a massive, black, crystalline structure that jutted from the ice wall like a broken shard of glass. That is not natural. It's too sharp. Too dead. Ash approached cautiously. The crystal hummed with the faint hollow signature. It's a receiver, Roxie analyzed, tapping the crystal gingerly. It's funneling the void energy somewhere. Suddenly, the cold intensified. It wasn't just a drop in temperature, it was an existential chill. The blue ice around them went white. A figure emerged from the blizzard, Varian. He stood 50 feet away, utterly unbothered by the cold, his silver hair immaculate. He wasn't in a tuxedo this time, but a sleek, armored coat that shimmered with the same violet energy as the shattered shard. He smiled, a wide, predatory expression. Welcome, champion. I knew the vanity of a hero would lead you here. My little experiments were merely invitations. This ends now, Varian, Ash growled. He threw out 2 Pokeballs. Crocodile. Dragonite. Full power. Crocodile landed, instantly sinking its claws into the unstable ice for purchase. Dragonite roared, its powerful wings immediately fighting the churning wind. Varian didn't move. He simply raised his diamond-tipped cane. You speak of ending things, Ash. I speak of completion. Varian threw out 2 Pokeballs. They were sleek, black, and silent. From the balls emerged 2 colossal figures, Hydreigon. But they weren't the confused, chaotic beasts of Team Plasma. They were streamlined, disciplined, their 3 heads scanning the battlefield with ruthless intelligence. Their scales shimmered with a layer of ice. They're armored, Roxie exclaimed. Some kind of chemical bonding. Their scales are resisting the cold. Hydreigon. Dark Pulse. Varian commanded. The 2 Hydreigon didn't use the chaotic scattershot often seen in battle. They fired synchronized beams of void energy, a compressed black hole, aimed directly at the ice structure they were standing on. The ice didn't shatter, it vaporized. Down. Ash shouted, grabbing Iris and tackling her behind a jutting slab of rock. Roxie threw herself flat. The resulting shockwave of ice fragments shredded the air where they had been standing. Dragonite. Counter with Dragon Pulse. Crocodile. Stone Edge. Ash commanded. Dragonite launched a sphere of green energy. The Hydreigon intercepted it with their combined Dark Pulse. The 2 attacks neutralized each other perfectly, a testament to Varian's precise training. Crocodile's Stone Edge is too slow on this terrain. Ash analyzed, realizing his ground attack was crippled. They're using the environment against us. Champion, you cling to the weakness of tradition, Varian taunted, walking slowly towards them. You fight on their terms. I have created something superior. Bisharp, eliminate the heiress. Varian threw a 3rd ball. A Bisharp materialized, armored in dark obsidian plating. It didn't rush. It moved with unnatural speed, running along the sheer ice wall like a shadow. Its blades were coated in a crystalline substance. Iris. Haxorus. Iris threw her ball. Haxorus roared, but the sound was choked by the cold. It was immediately targeted by Bisharp, which was using its immense speed to keep Haxorus off balance. Scolipede. Iron Defense. Roxie yelled, launching her own Pokémon to intercept. The battlefield became a 3-front war. Ash's team locked in a stalemate with the Hydreigon, Iris's Haxorus struggling against the icy Bisharp, and Roxie's Scolipede trying to act as a defensive barrier. Ash realized Varian wasn't trying to win the battle, he was buying time. He looked past the fight. Behind Varian, the black crystalline structure was pulsing rapidly. A small fissure was opening at its base, revealing an inner core of pure, swirling darkness. He's activating the core. Ash realized. He's not here for the battle, he's here for the prize. Pikachu. Iron tail on the core. Ash ordered, pointing past the fray. Pikachu, who had been darting through the chaos, launched himself toward the crystalline structure. Varian finally showed emotion, a flicker of panic. No. Bisharp. Stop the rat. Bisharp abandoned Haxorus, cutting across the field toward Pikachu. Dragonite. Hyper Beam. Full power, now. Ash roared. Dragonite, seeing the target open, released a massive, blinding beam of orange energy, not at Bisharp, but at Varian. Varian was fast. He ducked, but the hyper beam struck the crystal directly behind him. The structure fractured. The internal void energy swelled, unstable and immense. A necessary sacrifice, Varian whispered. He reached into the fissure, retrieving a pulsating, black object, a fist-sized fragment that looked like a piece of frozen shadow. The hollow shell core. You lose, champion, Varian said, holding the core aloft. You focus on the pieces. I take the source. A massive, chilling energy emanated from the core. The 2 Hydreigon stopped fighting and focused their dark pulse onto the ground between them and Ash. Retreat. Varian ordered. The Hydreigon carved a path of shattered ice and toxic void. Varian vanished behind a wall of black fog, taking the core with him. Ash's team was exposed, running on fumes, and suddenly facing a massive, uncontrolled discharge of void energy. Crocodile. Earth power. Contain the ice. Ash yelled. Dragonite. Shield us. Dragonite roared, its body glowing as it protected the triad from the worst of the blast. The force slammed Ash backward, knocking the air from his lungs. He felt a sharp, burning pain in his ribs. The impact was brutal. When the dust settled, Varian was gone. They huddled in a makeshift ice cave an hour later, the cold finally starting to penetrate their bones. Ash was leaning heavily against a rock, wincing with every breath. Roxie was using a specialized thermal gel to treat Dragonite, whose scales were coated in ice. Iris was tending to Ash, her hands gentle but efficient. Broken ribs, Iris diagnosed, her face pale in the light of the small fire they had managed to ignite using Pignite's weak, sheltered flame. At least 3. You need rest. We let him get away, Ash grit out, ignoring the pain. The failure tasted like copper and cold. He didn't want to fight us. He wanted a distraction. It was a trap, Roxie muttered, massaging Scolopede's legs. He knew you would charge. He played your hero complex against you. My hero complex, Ash repeated, the words sounding hollow. He had been outmatched tactically. He had thrown his strongest hitters at an armored, disciplined enemy in a terrain that negated their speed and power. Varian had been calculating, cold, and utterly dominant. Ash hadn't just lost the battle, he had been outmaneuvered by a superior intellect. We shouldn't have gone in without more intel, Iris admitted, securing a binding around his chest. I should have felt the depth of the void here. My dragon sense was blinded by the intensity. And I missed the chemical makeup of his armor, Roxie added, frustrated. We were too focused on the fight. He knew our weaknesses, Ash said, staring into the flickering fire. He knew Iris's reliance on instinct, Roxie's reliance on tech, and my reliance on commitment. He looked at them. They were battered, bruised, but whole. We need to get out of here, Ash commanded, trying to ignore the fire in his chest. We go back to Castelia. We lock down the League. He has the core now. He's going to strike at the political heart of Unova. Roxie scooted closer to Ash, her presence a solid warmth against the oppressive cold. We failed the mission, Ash. But we didn't fail the Triad. Iris nodded, her eyes meeting his. When you blocked that blast, you saved us, Ash. That wasn't a tactical move. That was you being you. And Varian still doesn't understand that strength. Ash closed his eyes, leaning his head back against the ice. They were right. He had lost the field, but he hadn't lost the partners. The foundation of the Triad was sound. But Varian had the hollow shell core. And Ash knew, with a certainty that chilled him more than the chasm, that the enemy had just escalated the war to a divine level. The next attack wouldn't target the cities. It would target the spirit of Unova itself. Castelia, Ash rasped. Let's move. He pushed himself up, wincing, but steady. The defeat was a bitter pill, but it cleared his vision. He needed to stop being the champion. He needed to start being the king. Chapter 5 End. Chapter 6. Discordant Harmonies. The private champion's residence, a sprawling penthouse atop the tallest tower in Castelia City, was meant to be a sanctuary. Instead, it felt like a pressure cooker. They had returned from the giant chasm defeated, bruised, and carrying the icy chill of failure. Ash's broken ribs were strapped tight beneath his shirt, a constant, sharp reminder of Varian's power. The League Council had immediately descended, demanding answers, but Ash had invoked the sovereignty clause, and locked himself and his partners away. The air in the living room was thick with resentment. Roxie was pacing near the floor-to-ceiling windows, her movements quick and agitated. Iris sat on the edge of a sleek, expensive sofa, her posture rigid, her face a mask of disappointment. It was reckless, Iris snapped, finally breaking the brittle silence. Going in blind, straight into his known territory. You knew the Hydreigon had armor, Ash. Why push Dragonite to Hyper Beam? It was predictable. Because predictability is better than paralysis. Roxie whirled around, her voice sharp as glass. If we had sat around running a chemical analysis for 4 days, Varian would have already nuked the entire city with that core. We failed because your Dragon Master heritage hesitated when we needed speed. Hesitation. I was calculating the risk. Iris retorted, standing up. My ancestors survived for millennia by being patient. You would rather charge in, blow something up, and ask questions later. And you would rather hide behind archaic customs while the world burns. Enough. Ash's voice was low, strained by the pain in his chest, but it cut through the argument like a razor wire. He pushed himself off the wall where he had been leaning, ignoring the flash of agony in his ribs. Sit down. Both of you. Now. They hesitated, glaring at each other, but the look in Ash's eyes, tired, but absolute, compelled them. They sat, one on either end of the long sofa, separated by a continent of velvet. Ash walked over to the windows, looking down at the endless lights of the city. We failed. That's fact. We failed because we were fighting three separate battles. Iris was fighting for tradition. Roxie was fighting for freedom. I was fighting for the League. He turned back to them. Varian didn't defeat my Pokemon. He defeated our unity. He walked over to a bar cart and poured 3 glasses of water, spiking one with a League-issued anti-inflammatory. He handed the glass to Iris first. Iris, you are the only one who can sense the void. Your instinct is vital. But Varian used the fear of failure, the fear of letting down the elders, to make you cautious when we needed a push. He made you hesitate. Iris took the water, her lower lip trembling slightly. I thought I was being responsible. You were, Ash said gently. But responsibility can't become a cage. He handed the second glass to Roxie. Roxie, your aggression is our shield. Your refusal to back down is why we survived Verbank. But Varian used your anger, your hatred of authority, to make you ignore the rules of the terrain. He made you reckless. Roxie stared into the water. If I wasn't reckless, I wouldn't be me. I don't want you to stop being you, Ash said, meeting her eyes. I want you to use the aggression as a scalpel, not a hammer. He took his own glass, moving to stand between them, equidistant. The unity decree isn't about me marrying the past and the future. It's about you two merging the past and the future. You are the balance. He looked at Iris. You tell us when to wait. He looked at Roxie. You tell us when to explode. And I will be the one who makes the final call. And if we can't agree? Roxie challenged, her voice still rough. Then we haven't trained hard enough, Ash replied simply. I am not your king. I am the neutral ground. You need to stop fighting each other and start figuring out how the other one works. He walked into the kitchen area. No more politics tonight. No more war. We're going to order terrible takeout, and we're going to talk about anything that isn't the League or a legendary Pokemon. Iris and Roxie stared at each other across the divide. The tension lingered, thick and potent, but Ash had deflected the energy, redirecting it from anger to confusion. A few minutes later, Ash reappeared, carrying 3 plates heaped with greasy, spicy noodles, the only dish Roxie approved of that didn't involve poisoning him. So, Ash said, handing a plate to Iris. Iris, tell Roxie about the worst day you had as a gym leader. Roxie, tell Iris about the stupidest fight you ever had with your band. They ate in silence for a while, the only sounds the clatter of forks and the distant Castelia traffic. The stupidest fight, Roxie finally sighed, setting her plate down, was over a guitar pick. My drummer, Billy, claimed I stole his lucky green pick. I hadn't. I used a red one. He started screaming that I was destroying the band's feng shui. I threw a drum cymbal at his head. He quit. He came back the next day because he couldn't afford the rent. Iris listened, a small, genuine smile tugging at her lips. That sounds utterly exhausting. It's rock and roll, Roxie shrugged. My worst day, Iris began, looking down at her food. Was right before I left for the League. A massive drought hit the village. The elders were praying for rain, but nothing worked. Drayden was desperate. I tried to use Dragonite's rain dance, but I was scared of using too much power, worried I'd flood the valley instead. I failed. I was standing there, covered in mud, watching the trees die, and I realized, I had all this strength, but I was still just a child with a garden hose. Roxie's abrasive exterior softened. She looked at Iris, seeing past the regal dress to the girl who worried about nature. You weren't a child. You were just out of your element. You can't fix a drought with a Pokemon move. You need to find the chemical balance in the soil. And you can't fix a band with a drum cymbal, Iris shot back, but it wasn't a jab. It was an observation. You need to find the harmony in the sound. They both looked at Ash. He hadn't interfered, simply letting them talk. They had found their common ground. Their fear of failure, and their shared desire for practical solutions. The argument was over. The partnership was beginning. Later, the penthouse was quiet. Ash had showered, the hot water easing the throbbing in his ribs, but the pain remained. He was in his room, trying to force himself to sleep, but the failure in the chasm played on a loop in his mind. A soft knock came at the door. "It's open," Ash whispered. Iris entered first. She was wearing a simple silk robe, her hair loose. She didn't speak, just walked to his bedside. A moment later, Roxie entered. She wore an old band t-shirt and sweats. She looked apprehensive, but determined. Iris sat on the left side of the bed. Roxie sat on the right. Ash was caught between the softness of the dragon and the sharp energy of the punk. "We talked," Iris said simply, her hand reaching out to touch his forehead. "We think you're going to push yourself until your ribs puncture a lung," Roxie added dryly, but her hand, resting on his shoulder, was warm. "And if you die, Varian wins. And then we have to deal with the council alone." A compelling argument, Ash managed a weak smile. "This decree," Iris began, her voice low. "It was supposed to keep us apart. But after tonight, we realize it's the only thing keeping us together. Not just with you, Ash." She looked at Roxie. "But with her. I need her recklessness to stop me from stalling. She needs my history to keep her from blowing up the entire map." "We're your spotters," Roxie said, leaning closer. "You're the center mass. But you can't carry the weight alone. That's why there are 3 points to the Tao. Balance." Ash looked from one to the other. Their eyes held a depth he hadn't seen before. They weren't fighting for him. They were fighting with him. They were choosing him, not because of the law, but because he was the anchor they both desperately needed. Ash reached out, taking both of their hands. The silk of Iris's robe, the rough cotton of Roxie's shirt. Contrast and complementarity. "I'm tired of losing," Ash confessed, the admission raw and quiet. "I need to win the next one." "Then let us heal you," Roxie whispered, her hand moving from his shoulder to stroke his bruised chest. "Let us hold the crown for a while," Iris finished, her fingers running through his hair. It wasn't a sudden burst of passion. It was a slow, deliberate act of comfort. Ash pulled them both closer, one on each side. Iris leaned against his shoulder, her warmth deep and steady. Roxie lay her head against his good side, her energy a reassuring hum. They didn't speak. They didn't move. They simply existed in the same space, the silence profound and restorative. The pressure of the world, the council, the defeat, and Varian, all retreated to the distant fringes. Ash was the center, and they were the stabilizing forces. The bond was forged not in pleasure, but in shared exhaustion and mutual survival. It was intimate, quiet, and absolutely vital. It was the moment the political triad became a genuine, loving partnership. Ash slept for 6 uninterrupted hours. When he woke, the room was empty, but the pain in his ribs had dulled significantly. He found Iris and Roxie in the command center, a small, hidden room accessible only via biometric scan. They were both at the main console, projecting a large holographic map of Unova. "I reached out to Skyla," Iris said, turning to him. She was back in control, her energy renewed. "She's an old league friend of mine. Her Mistralton gym and airport are completely isolated from Castelia's grid. We need to get out of the city," Roxie said. "If Varian attacks here, we're crippled. We need high ground and an open field." "I agree," Ash said, moving to the console. "We need to get the Hydreigon and Dragonite back to fighting trim. We need to train with altitude and speed." "Skyla suggests a training retreat at the Mistralton airfields," Iris confirmed. "She says it's the only place big enough to run Dragon versus Dragon drills without collapsing a city." "It's a good plan," Ash said, analyzing the flight path. "It puts us out of Varian's immediate reach, and we can test new strategies against the cold." Ash looked at the projection of Skyla's face on the screen, smiling, enthusiastic, and ready to help. "Call her back," Ash said. "Tell her we accept. We leave in 6 hours." As Iris initiated the call, Ash felt a faint, cold flicker in his aura, a subtle disturbance that didn't belong to the room. It was gone immediately, masked by the energy of the communication link. He glanced at Iris, then at Roxie. They were focused on the screen, relief evident in their posture. Ash pushed the instinct away. Skyla was a friend, a gym leader. He missed the small, imperceptible shift in the angle of Skyla's digital smile on the screen. A smile that was just a shade too wide, a moment too forced. The center of the formation was solid. But the perimeter was already compromised. Chapter 6 End. Chapter 7. The God Killer. The air above Mistralton was cold, clean, and vast. A perfect antidote to the stagnant defeat of the giant chasm. Ash stood on the roof of the airfield's main hangar, the wind biting at his exposed hair. Below him, the League's best engineers and mechanics were busy reinforcing Dragonite's harness and calibrating Haxorus's armor plating. Roxie was directing the installation of sonic dampeners on the runway, designed to counteract Varian's high-frequency weapons. Iris was leading a high-altitude sparring session. Ash watched as Dragonite and Haxorus dueled thousands of feet above the clouds. They weren't fighting for aggression. They were moving in synchronized patterns, a destructive dance. Dragonite would feint with speed, forcing Haxorus to counter with sheer power, their combined movements leaving swirling contrails in the sky. The resonance is perfect, Roxie called up, adjusting her thermal goggles. Dragonite's pulse is compensating for Haxorus's rotational inertia. Their combined attack profile is now completely unpredictable. Ash smiled, feeling a surge of satisfaction. They had taken the lessons of the chasm to heart. The Triad wasn't just a political unit, it was a combat strategy. Iris's innate dragon sense, Roxie's precision engineering, and Ash's tactical command had created a force multiplier.
A shadow fell over the hangar. Skyla, the gym leader and aviator, landed gracefully on the roof, dismounting from her swana. She was bundled in flight gear, but her eyes held a brittle, distant look that Ash hadn't seen on her before. "The wind currents are stable, champion," Skyla reported, her voice unnaturally flat. "Your team is ready. They're running a final drill near the Nimbus point. It's isolated, perfect for testing." "Thanks, Skyla," Ash said, noting the way her eyes darted away from his. "We're ready to deploy our full team for the final run." Ash reached for his belt, but Skyla's hand shot out, catching his arm. Her grip was surprisingly strong. "Don't," she whispered, her usual easy confidence completely gone. She was trembling. "Don't go to Nimbus Point, Ash." Ash stared at her. "What are you talking about? It's not safe," she choked out. "The training. The timing. I told them. I told Varian where you would be." The clarity of her betrayal was a physical blow, sharper than the impact of the ice in the chasm. "Skyla," Ash said, keeping his voice dangerously low, "look at me." She met his gaze, and the tears started. He threatened to collapse the power grid on Mistralton and let the whole city fall into the canyon. He said he would show the world that the League protects the rich, not the poor. "I had to choose, Ash. I had to choose my people over yours." "It's not about sides, Skyla," Ash said, his voice hardening, but devoid of anger. He didn't see a traitor, he saw a desperate soldier. "It's about stopping a madman." Before Skyla could reply, the emergency siren at the airfield began to wail, not the normal security alarm, but the deep, resonant tone reserved for regional catastrophes. Roxie's voice crackled through Ash's earpiece. "Ash, something big is happening. Check the main news feed, it's all gone dark." Ash sprinted to the hangar command center, Skyla running guiltily behind him. On the massive screen, the League channel was replaced by a static-filled, live video feed from the giant chasm. In the center of the frame stood Varian, the black crystalline core floating above his hand. He was surrounded by a legion of armored Hydreigon and Bisharp, a small army. And floating above him, shrouded in ice and utterly still, was Kurum. Kurum was not fighting. It was twitching, its massive body glowing with a sickly violet light that matched the core. "My fellow citizens of Unova," Varian's voice cut through the static, calm and terrible. "For too long, you have suffered under the farce of the Tao. You were promised truth, and given lies. You were promised ideals, and given corruption. You live in a world of endless battle and perpetual pain." He raised the core higher. "I offer a conclusion. A release. Kurum is the void, the essence of neutrality. With the aid of this core, the extracted stillness of the original fracture, I have filled that void with purpose. My purpose." On the screen, the violet light pulsed, and Kurum let out a shriek that was not of pain, but of violation. A massive, frozen mirror of shadow spread from its core, engulfing the entire chasm. "I have merged the boundary with the will," Varian announced. "Kurum is no longer the shell. It is the God Killer. And it will usher in the great stillness. The world you know ends in 1 hour. The screen cut to static. The command center was plunged into shocked silence. He corrupted Curum, Iris whispered, staggering back. He merged his nihilism with the boundary. It's worse than that, Roxie said, her voice shaking for the first time. She pointed at the global weather map projection. Curum is reacting to the core. The ice is expanding. Not just in the chasm. It's spreading across the continent. Within 3 hours, the eastern half of Unova will be flash frozen. Ash looked at the map. His mind worked with frightening speed, calculating vectors, resource distribution, and response times. The League, paralyzed by bureaucracy, would be too slow. The Elite Four were scattered. The time for caution was over. Skyla, Ash said, turning to her. Where is the trap? Skyla, galvanized by the sight of Curum, stammered, the trap. The mercenaries are using sonic dampeners on the jets on the main runway. They were supposed to ambush you as you took off for Nimbus Point, stripping you of your air support. They're still there.
Good, Ash said, a terrifying calm settling over him. We're going to use them.
He grabbed a heavy headset, adjusting the microphone. He signaled the League technicians to give him the full regional broadcast frequency. Iris, Roxie, Ash commanded. Get Dragonite and Haxorus back here. Skyla, get your Swanna ready. We need to clear that runway. Ash, what are you doing? Roxie demanded. We need to rally the Elite Four, not fight a small skirmish. Ash looked at the screen, at the creeping white death spreading across Unova. The Elite Four can't rally hope, Ash said. They rally troops. I rally the world. I'm the champion now, and I'm going to use my voice. The signal cut through all channels. Emergency military frequencies, civilian news networks, even the pirate radio stations Roxie used to monitor. The entire region saw the face of Ash Ketchum projected onto every available screen. He didn't wear a suit. He wore his torn, soot-stained travel jacket. His hair was wind-whipped. He looked less like a politician and more like a warrior who had just walked off the battlefield. My name is Ash Ketchum, he began, his voice amplified, carrying the sheer weight of his aura across the airwaves. It was low, firm, and entirely without fear. An enemy has seized the ultimate weapon of this region, Curum. He intends to use the power of the void to freeze Unova, to bring an end to all life and all struggle. He wants silence. Ash paused, letting the fear sink in, then he struck with hope. He failed to understand one thing. Unova is not defined by its silence, it is defined by its noise. It is defined by the booming courage of Drayden. It is defined by the passionate music of Roxie. It is defined by the soaring ideals of Skyla. And it is defined by the unwavering truth of Iris. He looked directly into the camera, his eyes burning with conviction. This is not a time for the League. This is a time for the people. You are not cattle waiting for the champion to save you. You are the heart of this land. If you have a Pokeball, hold it. If you have a voice, use it. If you have strength, deploy it. Gym leaders. Lock down your cities, defend your people. Elite Four. I need you to converge on the chasm. Slow him down. Trainers of Unova. I demand your courage. Protect your neighbors. Fight the ice. Do not give him the silence he craves. He clenched his fist, pounding it lightly against his chest, the sight of his cracked ribs. I am the champion of Unova. My path is one of perpetual struggle, of constant striving. And I swear to you now, I will not let this region fall to nihilism. We will fight the ice until it melts, and we will defeat this god-killer. Rally, for Unova. Ash cut the feed. The command center was buzzing. The response was immediate. Drayden was locking down Opalucid. Lenora was mobilizing relief teams. The region had a general, and they were answering the call. That was presidential, Roxie whispered, staring at the blank screen. It was command, Iris corrected, her eyes shining with pride and urgency. Ash, Skyla said, her face set with grim determination. The mercenaries are scrambling. They heard the broadcast. They know you're coming. Good, Ash said, grabbing a handful of Ultra Balls. We're giving them a target. The battle for the main runway was a frantic, necessary rush. Ash, Iris, and Roxie, flanked by Skyla, moved like a perfectly calibrated machine. The mercenaries, led by armored Bisharp and Houndoom, were guarding the sonic dampeners that crippled air travel. Skyla, Use your speed, Ash yelled. Clear the perimeter, Dragonite, cover the exits. Skyla's Swanna soared, using Hurricane to blast the Houndoom back from the perimeter fence. Dragonite unleashed a relentless barrage of Dragon Claws, protecting the flank. Iris and Roxie fought side by side, their styles now perfectly complementary. Roxie's Garbodor laid down defensive clouds of poison gas, blinding the enemy. Iris's Haxorus, working with Roxie's sonic instructions, charged through the smoke, using its axe-like tusks to cleave the Bisharp's armor. Ash, leading with Pikachu and Crocodile, targeted the dampeners. Pikachu, quick attack. Crocodile, dig. The fight was fast, brutal, and asymmetrical. They were fighting humans who treated Pokémon as tools, not partners. Crocodile erupted from the ground beneath the dampeners, shattering the equipment. Pikachu followed with a massive thunderbolt, frying the remaining circuits. Airfield is clear. Ash roared into his comms. Roxie, Iris. We're taking the league's fastest jet. We're going to catch Varian at the chasm. They sprinted toward the jet hangar. Skyla caught up to Ash, her face streaming with sweat and grime. Ash, wait. I'm going with you. I owe you this. No, Ash said firmly. I need you here. I need you to be the air traffic controller for the entire region. Coordinate the gym leaders. You're the only one fast enough to do it. Ash looked at her, his expression softening. You made the hard choice, Skyla. Now make the right one. Protect your city. We'll protect the world. Skyla nodded, a burden lifting from her shoulders. Go save us, champion. Iris and Roxie climbed into the sleek, black jet. Ash slammed the cockpit door shut and took the controls. Strap in, Ash commanded, pulling the throttle to maximum. We're going to ride the storm. As the jet screamed down the runway, ascending into the skies above Mistralton, the screen on the dashboard flickered back to life. It was a weather satellite image. The vast, frozen shadow of Kyurem was now visible, stretching like a dark stain across the continent. The ice was moving faster than predicted. Ash looked at Iris and Roxie, their faces grim but resolute in the dim light of the cockpit. He wants silence, Ash said, piloting the jet toward the vortex. We'll give him a symphony. Chapter 7 and Chapter 8. The Hollow King. The jet screamed across the Unovan sky, battling an elemental anomaly. Outside the cockpit, the world was a swirling vortex of white and black, the expanding ice fields of Kyurem battling the raw, chaotic wind. The jet's exterior began to frost over, the thermal shielding struggling against the unnatural cold generated by the hollow shell core. Ash was gripping the controls, his focus absolute. Iris was co-piloting, her dragon sense providing uncanny real-time warnings about the erratic wind shears created by the ice fronts. Roxie was huddled over the main diagnostic panel, using her technical skills to shunt power from the non-essential systems to the engines and thermal buffers. The air is saturated with residual void energy, Iris reported, her voice strained. It's like flying through static. Any deeper, and the Pokémon might start to feel the chasm effect again. Roxie, can you stabilize the comms? I need to check in with Drayden, Ash ordered. Roxie's brow was furrowed in concentration. I'm fighting a ghost in the machine, Ash. The League's network is compromised. Someone buried a deep-level virus, siphoning our bandwidth and redirecting our tactical reports. Varian, Iris hissed. No, Ash said, his gaze fixed on the icy horizon. Varian is busy playing God. This is internal. This is betrayal. Roxie's fingers danced across the console, her speed amplified by frustration. Found it. The encryption key is tied to a specific League-issued terminal. Not Council. Not tech staff. It's an Elite Four terminal. She pulled up the identifier. The name flashed on the screen, cold and accusatory. Grimsley. The master of the dark type, the Elite Four member known for his cynical philosophical musings and obsession with gambling. Grimsley, Ash whispered. He felt a profound punch of disappointment, colder than the ice outside. He always said life was a game of chance. He must have decided Varian was the winning bet. He's siphoning the tactical data from the gym leaders network, Roxie reported, her voice laced with venom. He's giving Varian real-time counterintelligence on the regional defenses. We need to cut him off. Can you trace his location? Ash demanded. Yes. He's currently locked down in the old Black City data hub. Varian must have promised him access to the ultimate data vault, or something equally shiny. Before Roxie could cut the connection, the screen flashed. A distorted, static-filled video link opened, originating from Grimsley's terminal. The Elite Four member appeared, looking surprisingly calm despite the chaos. He wore his usual impeccable black and white attire, though his usually sleek hair was messy. "Ah, the champion," Grimsley drawled, a smirk playing on his lips. "Timely, as always. You found my little hideout." "Why, Grimsley?" Ash asked, his voice flat with lethal disappointment. "Why? Because I'm a gambler, champion," Grimsley replied, shrugging. "And I hate chaos. The Tao is a lie. Truth and ideals are merely two sides of the same rigged coin." Varian offers a beautiful, absolute conclusion. An end to the game. An end to the struggle. He offers certainty. And certainty, Ash, is the ultimate prize. "You betrayed the region for a philosophy," Iris spat. "I secured my odds, dragon. The league was dying from its own hypocrisy. Varian is just clearing the board." Grimsley leaned closer to the camera, his eyes gleaming. "And speaking of odds, I may have just discovered Varian's final move. Something about the core, and the location of the original dragon's scale, which he needs for the final fusion." "Give us the information," Ash commanded. "Not for free," Grimsley said, a flash of greed returning to his eyes. "Varian knows I talked to you. He's sending an armored detachment to silence me. I need extraction. You save me, I give you the final coordinates." Roxie slammed her fist on the console. "He's trying to bribe us. We can't divert, Ash. Every minute we waste, that ice spreads. Drayden and the others are relying on us." Ash looked at the weather map. The ice was moving faster than predicted, already licking at the shores of Accumula town. Diverting the jet would cost them a minimum of 2 hours. 2 hours meant the ice would reach Castelia. He looked at Grimsley's face on the screen. The face of a man who willingly doomed millions for a philosophical comfort. "Grimsley," Ash said, his voice hard as the giant chasm ice. "You knew the rules of the gamble when you made your choice. The house always wins." "You won't leave me to die, Ash," Grimsley challenged, his smirk faltering slightly. "You're the hero. It's not in your nature to sacrifice a man." "You sacrificed yourself when you sent those reports," Ash countered, "but I will take the information you have." Ash motioned to Roxie. "Roxie, put the comms on a tight loop. Get everything he knows about the core and the scale. Force the data out." Roxie's eyes widened, recognizing the cold-blooded efficiency. She looked at Iris, who gave a minute nod, a painful acceptance of the necessary act of betrayal. "If he knows the final coordinates, it's worth the price," Iris whispered. Roxie worked rapidly, bypassing Grimsley's firewall, flooding his terminal with digital demands for the information. Grimsley screamed in frustration as the Triad, working as a single, lethal unit, digitally extracted the details. The scale. The core. The fusion point is the White Forest, Grimsley finally yelled, breaking under the digital assault. "He needs the pristine energy of the forest to stabilize the Tao fusion. Save me, Ash. I gave you the data." "Thank you for the information, Grimsley," Ash said, his expression empty. He reached out and slammed his palm onto the "Terminate Link" button. The screen went black, replaced by the radar. A massive tremor shook the jet. Roxie's secondary monitor showed a massive explosion centered exactly on the location of the Black City data hub. Varian had been true to his word. Grimsley was gone. The air in the cockpit was suffocating. "Ash," Roxie said softly, her fingers still shaking on the keyboard. You left him." "Yes," Ash stated, not defending the action, simply owning it. "He chose the void. He chose Varian over the region. Our mission is to protect the whole, not to save the self-condemned." Iris leaned over and kissed Ash on the cheek, a gesture of silent approval and shared pain. That was the choice of a king, Ash, not a hero. The final plan came together in a hurried, adrenaline-fueled rush. The jet was approaching the chaotic storm front surrounding the chasm. Using the data pried from Grimsley, they knew Varian's final objective, the White Forest, a place of pure natural energy, which he would use as a stabilizing nexus to complete the Curum fusion and finalize his great stillness. But Varian had to pass through the giant chasm first to move the God Killer. He's expecting us to land and challenge the armies he left behind, Ash said, pointing at the radar showing Varian's Hydreigon defense line around the chasm's edge. We can't get through that air defense, Roxie confirmed. Dragonite and Haxorus are strong, but they're still type-matched against that many ice-armored Hydreigon. Ash looked at the console, his gaze settling on the low-altitude thermal readings near the chasm's frozen walls. He's expecting a charge, but we're giving him a sprint, Ash said. Iris, you saw Varian's Hydreigon defenses. They focus on height and range. But they're not ready for a low-altitude ground assault. The ground is too unstable, Iris countered. It's all cracked ice and void energy seepage. We're not running on the ground, Ash said, a dangerous glint in his eyes. He reached for a fresh set of Ultra Balls. We're using the walls. We're going to use the jet for cover, and then we're going straight up the side of the chasm. Roxie's eyes widened with a mix of terror and excitement. You want to climb the frozen wall of the void? I want to hit Varian before he can take Kyurem and the core to the White Forest, Ash confirmed. Iris, Haxorus and Dragonite need to provide a tactical vacuum, distraction, pure and simple. Roxie, you rig the jet's engine to overload once we eject. I want that thing crashing into his forward defenses. A distraction, a bomb, and a climb, Roxie summarized, a wild grin returning to her face. Sounds like rock and roll. Ash, what about the core? Iris asked, strapping herself into the ejector seat. How do we fight a corrupted legendary god killer? Ash reached up and touched the bandage on his ribs. The pain was dull now, a constant reminder of the failure he could not repeat. We don't fight the god killer, Ash said, his voice steadying. We fight the man controlling it. And we show Varian that the strength of the Tao isn't in absolute power, but in absolute unity. Ash angled the jet downward, plunging into the chaotic maelstrom of the chasm's airspace. Hold tight, he said. Next stop, the summit, Chapter 8 end. Chapter 9. The Trinity fusion, the cockpit of the League jet filled with the raw, deafening roar of the descent. The airframe shuddered violently as Ash slammed the nose down, aiming for the densest concentration of Varian's armored Hydreigon on the chasm floor. 20 seconds to impact. Roxie shouted, her hands flying across the console, setting the detonation sequence. She was stripped down to her combat gear, sleek, poison-resistant armor beneath her coat. Dragonite, Haxorus, eject, Ash commanded into his comms. Diversion pattern beta. 2 massive spheres of light slammed into the ice below, releasing the dragons. Dragonite immediately ascended into the blizzard, drawing fire from the air defenses, while Haxorus tore through the ice towards the Hydreigon formation, creating chaos and confusion. Eject sequence in 5. Iris yelled, her knuckles white on the controls. She looked at Ash, her eyes burning with pure, desperate resolve, for Unova. For the triad, Ash countered, 3, 2, 1. The explosive bolts fired. Ash, Iris, and Roxie were blasted out of the failing jet in 3 distinct plumes of smoke, landing heavily on a sheer ice shelf 50 feet below the rim. Above them, the League jet, now a rogue missile of steel and fuel, screamed through the air and slammed into the center of Varian's outer defenses. The resulting explosion, a massive concussive bloom of fire and shrapnel, vaporized the armored Hydreigon and cleared a temporary path down the chasm wall. Go! 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 Ash barked, already scrambling. He had ditched his injured arm, relying on pure, raw strength and aura-enhanced grip. Roxie deployed climbing claws built into her boots and gloves, her movements precise and fast despite the impossible angle. Iris moved with the innate fluidity of a dragon master, finding purchase in microscopic cracks, scaling the wall like a gecko. They climbed toward the core nexus, driven by the knowledge that every second brought Varian closer to irreversible victory. Below them, the remaining enemy forces were mobilizing. Varian had lost his forward base, but he hadn't lost the initiative. They reached the floor of the chasm, landing in the eerie glow of the void. The ground here was not just ice, it was a solidified shadow, smooth, black, and radiating intense cold. Ahead of them, Varian stood on a raised platform carved from the black crystal. Above him, the corrupted Kyurem pulsed, its form now completely encased in a shimmering armor of violet light and crystalline ice, the God-Killer form. Varian held the hollow shell core aloft. The energy of the boundary was flowing into him, twisting his features into something cruel and magnificent. The champion arrives, covered in grease and desperation. Varian sneered, his voice amplified by the core, carrying the cold echo of 1,000 silent places. You crash your toys, but you cannot stop the inevitable. Varian's eyes locked onto Ash. You saved your partners. You threw away the lives of a dozen men to protect your selfish, sentimental bond. You are a hypocrite, Ash. You want a world of infinite struggle, but you cannot bear a single necessary sacrifice. You call it necessary, Ash said, stepping forward, Pikachu already on his shoulder, Crocodile at his side. I call it nihilism. Struggle is life, Varian. You're trying to achieve peace by murdering ambition itself. Then watch ambition die, Varian spat. He plunged the core into a receptacle at the base of the platform. The platform hummed. Kyurem, the god killer, let out a silent, psychic scream. The frozen shadow expanded, a tidal wave of absolute cold and crushing void energy. Crocodile, earth power, Pikachu, thunderbolt, Ash commanded, unleashing everything he had. The combined attack struck the ice-armored Kyurem, but the void energy absorbed the power, barely flickering. The ice wave slammed into the triad. Roxie acted instantly, throwing chemical counter-agents, a specialized thermal flare, onto the ground, creating a small zone of resistance. The ice is too thick. We can't break through that armor. It's not armor, it's fear, Iris shouted. It's pure, condensed emptiness. Ash saw the truth. They couldn't win this with brute force. Varian had transcended the laws of type and power levels. He had corrupted the Tao itself. The Tao, Ash whispered, realizing the only way out, we need the balance. He looked at Iris. Iris. The scale. You have the truth of the lineage, channel it, we need Reshiram. Iris nodded, her eyes closed. She reached beneath her coat and pulled out the scale of the first, the ancient, gray dragon scale. She focused her aura, pushing her innate dragon strength into the artifact, forcing the energy of truth, Reshiram, to emerge. A beacon of pure white light erupted from the scale, cutting through the violet shadow. Roxie. The void. Ash turned to the punk leader. You're the master of chaos. You understand the untamed. You are the necessary disorder? Channel the boundary. Roxie stared at him, bewildered. The boundary? I control poison and sound. How can I channel the space between dragons? It's chaos, Roxie. It's the primal, messy energy that refuses to be tamed. Ash yelled. Don't fight it, embrace the venom. Give the void a voice. Roxie closed her eyes, clutching her amplifier pack. She was the one who fought with the chemical imbalance of the world, with the screeching feedback of sound, the chaotic, necessary dissonance. She pushed her aura into her tech. A ring of screaming, high-frequency sound erupted from her pack. It wasn't just noise, it was structured chaos, an invisible, vibrational wave designed to disrupt Varian's perfect, frozen stillness. She was channeling the unpredictable energy of Kyurem, the boundary, against the corrupted Kyurem. The white light of truth and the chaotic energy of the boundary stabilized the air around Ash. The 3 points of the triad were established. Ash took a deep breath. He was the center. The anchor. The man who chased failure with dogged commitment. He represented the ideals, Zekrom. He reached into his core. He didn't use a pokeball. He focused his aura, channeling every desire, every moment of striving, every goal he had ever achieved, the raw, electric charge of perpetual ambition. Zekrom. Ash roared, the name echoing with the sound of 1,000 thunderclaps. Answer the call of ideals. The atmosphere detonated. A blinding arc of black lightning slammed down from the cloud-choked sky, striking the center of the triad. It wasn't the attack of a Pokémon, it was the manifestation of a concept. Zekrom materialized, massive and electric, its core blazing with blue fire. It roared, a sound that shook the very foundations of the chasm. The final battle was joined, Zekrom versus the God Killer. Ash, now astride Zekrom's back, felt the power of ideals surge through him. Varian. Your stillness ends now. Ash didn't need words for Zekrom. Their bond, forged in Kanto and Unova, was instantaneous. Zekrom charged, its body wreathed in electric fire, straight at the ice-armored Kyurem. The God Killer raised its claws. A beam of absolute zero energy, the black ice, shot out, aimed at Zekrom's face. Zekrom countered with Fusion Bolt. The two primordial energies met in a devastating, silent impact. On the ground, Iris and Roxie fought the spiritual war. Iris's white light of truth bathed the area, counteracting the pervasive darkness of the core. Roxie's sonic chaos hammered Varian's platform, disrupting his focus and introducing dissonance into the God Killer's crystalline armor. The core is the weak point. Iris screamed to Ash. The chaos is breaking his control, hit the core. Varian, enraged, abandoned the Kurum fight to focus on his immediate enemies. He seized the core, directing a blast of raw void energy at Roxie and Iris. Die in the silence. No, Ash roared. Zekrom spun, leaving a trail of electric fire. Ash leapt from Zekrom's back, executing a move learned from years of traveling, pure instinct. He rocketed toward the platform, his body encased in a shield of pure, raw aura, amplified by the ideals he now channeled. He crashed onto the platform next to Varian. Varian was shocked. He had expected a massive dragon attack, not a single, flawed human. You are nothing, Varian screamed, raising the core to blast Ash at point-blank range. I am the Link, Ash yelled. He didn't use a Pokemon move. He used his heart. He reached out and plunged his hand, the same hand that had just crushed a grenade, into the raw, exposed void energy of the core. The pain was unimaginable. It wasn't heat, it was pure, cold non-existence, freezing his nerves, his blood, his very essence. But Ash didn't let go. He held the void, and into it, he poured every ounce of his burning, stubborn ideals. He showed the nihilist Varian his endless vision. Every battle, every loss, every friend, every comeback. The core couldn't handle the contradiction. The power of ultimate stillness was met with the power of infinite striving. The core shattered. Varian shrieked, his silver armor cracking. The sudden influx of uncontrolled ideals ripped through his mental defenses. He collapsed, clutching his head, a broken, defeated man. The violet light faded. The ice armor dissolved. The God Killer disappeared. Kurum, massive, cold, and neutral, floated above the battlefield, momentarily stunned, before letting out a low, mournful roar and flying off toward the far reaches of the chasm. The ice storm immediately began to dissipate. Ash collapsed onto the platform. His hand was frostbitten, blackened, and lifeless. The pain was fading into numbness. Iris and Roxie rushed the platform, scrambling over the ruined crystal. Ash! Iris screamed, grabbing his arm. It's over, Ash choked out, his voice weak. He looked at his black hand. He's finished. Roxie pulled the thermal flare from her pack, wrapping his hand in emergency heat gauze. You idiot, that was suicidal. He chose the void, Ash muttered, looking at Varian, who was convulsing on the ground. I chose the life. Zekrom, its job done, bowed its massive head to the triad, acknowledged the established balance, and ascended into the clearing sky, leaving a promise of hope in its electric wake. They had won. Not by being stronger, but by being whole. Chapter 9 and Chapter 10. A new dawn. The giant chasm was silent. The oppressive chill was receding, replaced by the natural, biting cold of the region. The storm clouds were parting, and a weak, watery sun struggled to pierce the atmosphere. Ash lay flat on the jagged floor of the crystalline platform, his chest still heaving from the fight, the numbness in his right hand absolute. Iris was kneeling beside him, her hands glowing faintly with a healing light as she administered emergency aura treatment. Roxie was using thermal bandages and chemical agents to stabilize the frostbite, her movements rapid and precise. Around them, the League rescue teams descended, their faces a mixture of relief and horror. They secured the unconscious Varian, who lay broken and defeated where the core had shattered. We have him, a League security chief reported, his voice hushed. The core fragments are inert. The God Killer is gone. Drayden landed a moment later, his face etched with exhaustion and profound reverence. He looked at Ash, then at the shattered platform, and finally at Iris and Roxie, working in seamless, wordless concert. You saved us, champion, Drayden said, his voice a low rumble. You saved the balance. Ash nodded, unable to speak, the exhaustion claiming him. As he was lifted onto a stretcher and airlifted out of the chasm, his final sight was Iris and Roxie climbing onto the chopper with him. Their hands linked, his broken hand cradled between their two good ones. The war was over, but the work was just beginning. Weeks later, the champion's penthouse was quiet again, transformed from a chaotic war room back into a home. Ash's recovery was slow. The frostbite in his right hand was severe. It would heal, but never be quite the same. He trained with Pikachu and Crocodile, learning to compensate with his left hand, the setback adding a new layer of patience and grit to his style. Varian was imprisoned in a maximum security facility, awaiting a trial that would define the political future of Unova. The League, mobilized by Ash's broadcast, had performed admirably in the cleanup, but the power structure was cracked beyond repair. The council knew they could no longer rule by bureaucracy and secrecy. The days settled into a strange domestic routine. Iris spent her mornings consulting with the elders via video link, focusing on the ecological reconstruction of the ice-blighted eastern lands. Roxie spent her afternoons coordinating the Verbank industrial complex, leveraging her newfound political sway to enforce sweeping environmental regulations and secure worker rights. Ash watched them, often from the quiet comfort of the living room. The triad was no longer a political alliance, it was a functioning partnership. They were two contrasting facets of a single diamond, and Ash was the light that refracted through both. Their romance had grown past the necessity of the decree, settling into a deep, comfortable affection born of mutual survival and respect. They didn't just love him, they relied on each other, often retiring to the strategy room long after Ash was asleep, debating policy and planning the reconstruction of the region. The weight of the crown hadn't broken them, it had fused them. The League envoy arrived on a cool Tuesday morning. It wasn't the head of the council, but Agent Miller, the nervous bureaucrat who had once advised Ash to use Charizard to intimidate workers. Miller was pale and apologetic. He carried a slim portfolio of documents. Champion Ketchum, Miller began, clearing his throat. Iris and Roxie stood flanking Ash, their posture subtly aggressive. The council, in its first session since the crisis, has acknowledged your extraordinary service. You successfully defended the Tao and prevented the dissolution of Unova. Get to the point, Miller, Roxie said flatly. Miller flinched. Yes. Right. As the immediate threat, the schism between the Dragon factions and the industrial bloc has been neutralized, and the champion has demonstrated his ability to govern without the mandatory nature of the decree. He placed a single document on the table. It was titled, The Unova Unity Decree, Instrument of Annulment. The League hereby offers to dissolve the Union, Miller finished, relief flooding his face. The crisis is resolved. You are free to continue your championship without the burden of the archaic law, Champion Ketchum. Miss Iris and Miss Roxie are, of course, free to resume their independent lives and duties. Miller looked expectantly at Ash, waiting for the relieved sigh of a hero finally freed from political entanglement. The council had expected Ash, the eternal traveler, to jump at the chance for freedom. Ash looked at the paper. It was pristine, printed on the finest parchment. A simple signature, and the chains of the archaic law would be broken. Iris reached out, placing a hand on his shoulder. Roxie's fingers brushed against his good arm. They didn't speak. The choice was his. Ash looked up at Miller, his amber eyes clear and steady. Tell the council I decline. Miller blinked. Sir? But this is your freedom. The legal requirement is fulfilled. The public won't care. I don't care about the legal requirement, Ash said, picking up the document, and I don't rule by public opinion. He looked at Iris, who gave him a small, fierce smile. He looked at Roxie, whose jaw was set in proud defiance. This decree, Ash said, holding up the paper, it was the catalyst. It was the excuse we needed to force the issue. But what Varian tried to destroy, he inadvertently created. Ash slowly, deliberately, ripped the instrument of annulment in half. He dropped the pieces onto the floor. We are the Triad, Ash stated, his voice resonating with a quiet authority that transcended the title of champion. We are the new law of this land. Not because the council forced us, but because we chose it in the face of death. He placed his good hand on Iris's shoulder, then on Roxie's. Iris brings the wisdom of the earth, the patience of truth, and the history of Unova. Roxie brings the energy of the people, the chaos of ideals, and the vision of the future. I am merely the anchor that keeps the balance. This is not a political marriage, Miller, Roxie declared, stepping forward. This is a partnership forged in fire, and no piece of paper is going to dissolve it. Tell the council to stop wasting time drafting annulments, Iris added, her voice sharp with ancestral pride. Tell them to focus on the reconstruction. We have a region to rebuild. Miller, utterly defeated, gathered the torn pieces of the decree. Understood, champion. I will inform the council of the new reality. The sun was setting over Undella town, casting long shadows across the private beach Ash had secured for their brief respite. The light painted the ocean in shades of molten gold and deep violet. Ash sat on the sand, his injured hand resting on his knee. Iris was weaving a wreath of ocean flowers, the task grounding her in the quiet strength of nature. Roxie was sketching new blueprints for the Verbank reconstruction in a waterproof notebook, the lines sharp and aggressive. Ash watched them, a profound sense of peace settling over him. He was the champion, the victor of the ultimate battle, the leader of a ravaged region. The struggle would never end. New threats would rise. New crises would demand impossible choices. But he would not face them alone. Iris finished the wreath and rose. She walked over to Ash and gently placed the crown of flowers on his head. It was ridiculous, but it felt right. A king should wear something softer sometimes, she whispered, leaning down to kiss him. Roxie closed her notebook. She rose and walked to Ash's other side, resting her head on his shoulder. Don't get too comfortable, King, she murmured, her voice laced with promise. We run the region in the day. But at night, you still have to keep up. Ash wrapped his arms around them both, pulling them close. The smell of Iris's flower wreath and the faint, chemical tang of Roxie's industrial salve mingled in the cool evening air. He was no longer the boy who chased badges. He was the man who held the Tao, the champion who ruled with both truth and ideals, the anchor of a new dawn. He looked out at the ocean, at the vast, open horizon of the world they had fought and bled to save. It's going to be a long journey, Ash said. Good, Roxie replied, pressing closer. I hate boredom. Then let the struggle begin. Iris smiled, her eyes reflecting the setting sun. Together. Chapter 10 End.